live, episode GhettoRig 82.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back. Another episode here, a little bonus episode. We got someone very special in the house today. Biggest guest we've ever had yet to today. We got Michael Sartain on, guys. This is going to be an action-packed, information-packed episode. Hopefully, I think we can all learn a lot from this man right here. Very successful, done a lot in his life. Someone we could probably all look up to as someone we could, things we want to achieve as well.
Yeah, guys, one thing, because I don't want to interrupt the entire podcast with this little nonsense of like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. We're just going to say it once, and then because we want to hear as much as possible from Michael. And Michael, would you like to introduce yourself to our viewers and stuff like that? We know who you are, but...
Yeah, man, it's hard to describe sometimes. So I have a podcast. I think the reason why most people ask me to come on the show is I have a podcast called the Michael Sartain Podcast, and the concepts we discuss in the podcast have to do with evolutionary psychology. And a lot of times, what the studies in the podcast will bring up things that are unflattering to people, but they're based in science. And so a lot of people will get offended by some of the concepts that I'll come up with or that I'll discuss. Like, for instance, the concept of like when men and women cheat in a relationship, one is very different than the other. Like, for instance, when women cheat in a relationship, they're generally looking to move on. So it's actually way worse for the relationship. When a man cheats in a relationship, he's very rarely trying to move on. When you express stuff like that and you show the studies, it kind of pisses a lot of people off, and then you make clips on it. And that's essentially where a lot of the growth for my program came from, is that podcast. I also host a show called Access Vegas with Rollo Tomasi, where we'll have 10 girls on, some 8 to 10 girls on every week. And when we do, the girls come on, and usually, they're kind of straight laced or whatever, and then they'll start drinking or whatever, and then they start just telling the truth about everything. I had a girl on Thursday just come on there, and she, went from, kind of expressing how she's just not ready to get married, to she just gave a guy a blowjob a few minutes before coming on the show, to, and then she had a threesome with a girl sitting 2 girls to her right with that girl's boyfriend, and then the girlfriend then cheated on the boyfriend and admitted it on my show. Like, it was madness. So what happens is, like, there's this sort of watered down a belief, blue pill maybe, if you believe, of like how human nature works, and we try to dispel that. Rollo and I try to do that on our Access Vegas show. And then I have a Men of Action mentoring program where basically I take all the concepts that we discuss from evolutionary psychology, and just different things that I've learned over the last 25 years of doing everything from, I host the 3 biggest bikini competitions in the world. So that's going to be the one at Paradise Challenge, the one at Swimsuit USA, and then the Wet Republic one at MGM here in Las Vegas for $100,000. So I'm the host and the recruiter for all 3 of those. And then I have, like, I used to do the guest list for the Maxim parties. I was a videographer at the Playboy Mansion, worked at a nightclub, managed a strip club for a while. So this whole like social dynamics, nightlife, social media thing is another thing that I teach in my coaching program called Men of Action, where basically we look at networking as an evolutionary adaptation. Remember, we study evolutionary psychology, and then we take those concepts and then we apply it. Like, how can we use this in the real world? One of the best ways to explain how to use a concept like pre-selection, which is there's a thing in evolutionary psychology or evolutionary biology called sexy sons hypothesis, which is the concept of if several women like a man, then other women will like that man. And the reason why that works is because throughout evolution, women have wanted to have attractive attributes in their children so that their children will have more children. It's a way for them to sort of like guarantee their genetics get passed on. Well, when you see those concepts of, a pre-selection, what's a great example of that working? Well, we have, so here's one of my buddies right here. It's one of my rescues. When you see that concept happening, what is that? What are some examples of that? One of them is the best example I've ever seen would be what Dan Bilzerian has done. So Dan he's a guest on my show. Sometimes he comes on my program, and he also wrote a book called The Setup, where he kind of goes over the concepts of, like, as he was with more women started competing for his attention. And you can see like much lesser examples of that, like say a nightclub promoter or whatever. But then we take some of these concepts and then we nail it, we glean it all the way down to like an accountant, an attorney. How can he use signs of status and signs of social proof so that other people want to go to his events and work with him? You see this often. If you guys ever see personal injury attorneys, they do this with billboards in your city. You'll see this with politicians will do this, endorsed by so-and-so. Social proof is an extremely powerful concept, and we try to teach guys to use social proof in order to increase their dating life, increase their social life, increase their work life, finding new employees, finding new employers, finding new sponsors for their business, finding a buyer for their business. How do we do all that? We use networking as an evolutionary adaptation to do that. So those are kind of the three main things. I also am a retired U.S. military officer, and I was a quantitative analyst for a fund for a number of years. I still do that part time, and that's pretty much what I do. But I mean, that's the way to describe it. And I rescue animals. That's another thing I do. So that's pretty much it.
Are you,
I was
you
gonna
more
go
of a cat guy or a dog guy?
I live in a high rise. I think it's kind of unfair to have dogs in a high rise. I know there's a lot of people who have them here, but like having a dog locked up in a
I agree.
2 or 3 bedroom apartment, and having the dog have to wait every day
Yeah.
for you to walk it out when you don't have a yard. Now, if you have a penthouse with like a lot of room, then I think it's fine. For a house, if you have like a doggy door, the dog can. I think dogs should be able to go walk themselves. If they don't, I do think it's just imagine having to hold your bladder all day until your fucking dad came home. Like it just to me, I find that to be a bit cruel. So cats, cats are easier to train inside of an apartment. So that's why I have cats.
So,
Gotcha.
so you're also involved a lot with charities with veterans, right? Like so I think you just kind of skimmed over the part with the girls. So Michael brings in absolutely gorgeous women, right? And most of these women are your friends due to the bikini competitions, and then you have that's how you met them, right? And I think you've mentioned that Playboy, the wife of
Crystal Hefner. Hugh Hefner's widow.
Yeah, she's a good friend of yours. And how does that dynamic? How did that came about? How did you get to meet her, and how did that all?
Yeah, I haven't talked to Crystal in a while, but yeah, her and I we were friends. What happened was Crystal got hired. She wanted to be a DJ. A lot of the former Playmates were I and trying to play EDM music. Crystal wanted to be a DJ, and so Hard Rock had previously hired Paris Hilton. I have some videos with Paris Hilton when I interviewed her, but like Hard Rock had hired Paris Hilton to be a DJ, and then they were just basically hiring like the celebrity DJs. And the next one was Crystal Hefner. She's a really good DJ too. So what would happen was I was the MC for the bikini competition, and she was the DJ for the bikini competition. And we would also like she'd be a judge, and she just had a great time because all these girls would be stunning, and they would all the girls would be just like so enamored that Hugh Hefner's wife, who's a legit Playmate, obviously, Crystal Harris, was there. And so, we exchanged numbers, and then she started inviting me to the Playboy Mansion. I went to the last ever Midsummer Night's Dream with Hugh Hefner when he was still alive. I was there. And his brother Peter, I believe. I think it was he died a couple days after that. I was there with Bulzarian. I was there with Lindsay Palis. And yeah, so that's how that whole thing came about. But I mean, just a series of steps that went into making that happen. I mean, I just out of sheer luck, I ended up hosting the Maxim Halloween party in 2015, and that just kind of set off a chain of events because I had put so much work into my hosting that when I finally got the opportunity to do it on a big stage, I wasn't like good enough. I was so much better than everyone else on that carpet that like I started getting like opportunities pretty much immediately after that. And that's just a function of like working hard. That is not a function, like there wasn't an innate skill in me. It was one of these things where I knew I wanted to be better at this one thing than other people were. And that's what I did. And so I wasn't focused on coaching a business or running a coaching business back then. Back then, I just wanted to be the best red carpet host in the world. That was my intention, to be the most skilled red carpet host in the world. I would watch Ryan Seacrest. I would watch the guy from Saved by the Bell. What's his name? Hispanic guy, Mario Lopez. I think. Yeah, is it Mario Lopez or Mario? Yeah,
it is Mario Lopez. Yes.
Yeah, I would watch those guys because those guys were frequently red carpet hosts, and I was like, I want to be smoother than them. I want to be funnier than them. Now, obviously, they're way more famous than me. I'm never going to, I don't think I'm going to get to do the Grammys or whatever. Maybe I will. Actually, at this point, if I get big enough on social media, I probably would get to be able to do the Grammys. But I would watch, Seacrest doing it on red carpet. And I was like, he's good. I want to be better than him. And so that's what I obsessed over for a number of years. And it just opened up so many opportunities because I would get the opportunity to like interview people that were like 5 or 6 levels out of my league. I remember I'm friends with Jeremy Piven, just so random. The guy who played Ari Gold on Entourage. I met him at one time at a charity event that we were doing for domestic abuse. And we've become friends since then. And we talk every once in a while. I went to Playboy Radio one time because of my hosting stuff. And I ended up meeting Jim Jackson, who to me, as a Dallas Mavericks fan, I'm a huge fan of his because he played for my team back in the 90s. And he and I become friends. And these are just like random people that I've become friends with. But like, obviously the bigger people, like I'm also friends with Bulzarian, and I texted Andrew Tate last night. And some guys like that. Ty Lopez, I spoke at his event yesterday. And anything I can do for Dan Fleischman or Ryan Stewman or Wes Watson or those guys that are the coaches in my arena, I try to help them as much as I possible, and I ask for nothing in return. If Andy Frisella or Fresh and Fit or any of those guys say, "Hey, can you fly out here?" I would ask for zero compensation. I'd fly out on my own dime. I'd go on their show. I'd give them 4 hours of fucking fire. If they wanted me to, I'd bring girls on, and I'd go home and I'd tell them thank you the whole time. Because that's just, as a content creator, as a coach, like that's just that's the level of sacrifice you got to be willing to do in order to be successful.
That's awesome. So this actually is a perfect segue into our next segment. So all of us here are either immigrants that immigrated to United States or children of immigrants, right? And we know your mom is from Colombia, right?
Yes.
Okay.
She sure is.
So, and the second part of this is we truly believe in like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to know about Michael Sartain when you were younger. So how did that all came about? How did that all start? How did you, when did it start where you're like, okay, this is what I need to do to get there? Who instilled that in you? Was it your mom? Was it how did that all work?
So the first part, my mom coming over. So we had a ton of nurses and medical professionals leave the United States to go fight in Vietnam from 65 to 75. Yep. Because of that, there were a shortage of nurses in the United States, or there was just a necessity for more of them. My mother used that in order to get a green card. She came over. She had a degree in nursing in Columbia. Came over to the United States, got an additional degree in nursing in Washington, D.C. She went to school in Georgetown. I forgot what the name of the nursing school she went to. She got out, and that's how she got in. She found an avenue. And by the way, it's probably still the same way now. I mean, getting an advanced degree in nursing is a necessary skill set that the United States needs. You could probably get in the country that way still. That's how she came over. And then Mama met my dad, I believe, in 72 or 73. They got married in 74, and then I was born in 77. But yeah, I mean, the work ethic that she had, it really is one of these interesting things where she would look at other people that were minorities that lived in this country, and she would be like, and then she would look at people who emigrated, and she'd be like, these people who immigrated just work so much harder. That was one thing that she noticed. And there was something like the guys on Fresh and Fit talk about this often. They were like, people who emigrate to this country don't take it for granted, and people who live here do take it for granted. And so you just saw like this like huge difference in the level of work ethic. Now, this is just a generalization. Obviously, there's a lot of people who are born in this country who work hard, but it was just one of these things that they sort of noticed. And so as far as the work ethic, it was, I remember in college, like growing up, there was never, now remember, college means something different in 1996 than it does now. I wouldn't recommend it now to the same level. But in 1996, college was, the concept of me not going to college wasn't a reality. Every person in my, I hear people say, I was the first person in my family to go to college. Everyone in my family went to college. Most of them had graduate degrees. My grandfather was the dean of the business school at Southern Methodist University. He had a PhD. I have a couple of the PhDs in my family. My uncle, Robert, is the world's foremost orthopedic spinal surgeon. Robert Watkins IV. And so like I come from a family of educators. And so like I was going to college. There was no way I wasn't going to do that. But we didn't have a lot of entrepreneurs in my family. We didn't. A lot of government jobs. I ended up joining the military. I was the first person in my whole family to ever join the military. And then I was the first person in my family to go to UT Austin, because everyone in my family went to Southern Methodist in Dallas. And I just wanted to try something a little bit different and move away. I think it was just one of these things where I just didn't take for granted. I'll give you another thing. We lived, there's a great book about this. It's called The Millionaire Next Door. And it talks about how the majority of millionaires in this country were not born rich. They actually are self-made. And the majority of people who come from another country, they'll come and they'll become entrepreneurs. Just consider a woman who's perhaps she's Vietnamese and owns a nail salon, or someone who's Korean and buys a convenience store or something to that effect. I mean, those are the tropes, but there's millions of examples of stuff like this.
My entire family, when they got here, they all are on the same thing. They all purchased cleaning franchises. All my uncles had cleaning franchises.
Simple
my cousins.
jobs.
Yeah. But I mean, they did extremely well. I have cousins driving around GTRs, but they clean toilets. Like it is what it is.
Exactly. So that concept of like, working hard, and then also the concept of like pulling your money together. It was just one of these things where my family, I have 35 cousins, and a lot of them live here in the United States. They live in Garland, Texas, or they live in Rockwall, Texas. They live all in these suburbs of Dallas now, and they're all doing well. But my family, originally, my mother came over in '74, and then some of my family members came over because of asylum, because of persecution from cartel members in Colombia. So, that kind of stuff happened. And, I think one of the things that happened was the concept of a work ethic, the concept of gratitude, definitely came from my mother, just working hard and like not complain. It was not one of these things where she told me to not complain. It was like, no one complained. So you just didn't complain. You just kind of understood that that's the way it was.
It was like, it's almost not a part of you.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
And like I said before,
it wasn't instilled in you in any kind of way to be complaining
like I said
about
before,
anything.
Yeah. Like I said before, the concept of Millionaire Next Door, which is, again, a great book. One of the things they go over is like, my father was doing well financially, but we lived poor. I mean, we lived in a nice neighborhood, but like, he spent money on nothing. I'm telling you right now, I ate off that dollar menu at Wendy's more than 1,000 times in my life. I'm not kidding. Like, all through high school, I was eating a like $1.99 cheeseburger. Like, we spent no money on shit. My dad was always rolling a fucking 10-year-old Subaru, and my dad could afford anything. My dad owned part of a cable company, and we didn't have cable. Like, when I tell you like spendthrift, the rest of my family members couldn't believe. Like, and the thing is, to be fair, I make a good living now, and just something I explained to my girlfriend. We just don't spend money on superfluous shit. If I can't write it off for the business, don't buy it. Like that, it's kind of like how I look at it, So, it's one of these things, and like, that's how people are able to maintain wealth, and it really is a great way to live. I had Neil Patel on the other day. Neil Patel spends $340,000 a month on his life, just living. It's $340 a month is how much it costs him to live. I was with another guy, my dude I met last night. He took me to the Canelo fight last night, and he had a box in T-Mobile Arena, and he says he spends about $400,000 a month just on life. Like, that's private jets, that's food, that's the cost. His burn rate is like $4 million a year, just like on life. And I'm like, man, I can't. Even when I was a fucking captain in the Air Force as a major, making maybe $78,000 a year with flight and hazard pay, and I'm not being taxed on that income, obviously, because I'm being deployed to the Middle East. You don't pay federal income taxes on the months that you're deployed to the Middle East. And during that entire time, dude, I'm telling you, like, I spent nothing. I was like, how little can I spend in a month? Now, there are certain things I would recommend you spend money on. Like, I think you should all have a good laptop that you can run a business from, and you should have a quality phone that you can run a business from. Those things for sure. Your phone can be your camera, and then maybe things like meal prep and having a good gym to go to. Other than that, like, I don't spend money on shit. I really don't. I'm playing GTA Online right now, and I don't buy shark cards. You know what I'm saying? So
you mentioned a little bit about how like that there was that work hard and just kind of don't complain, right? Like that's kind of like a page out of a Jocko Wilkins's book, The Extreme Ownership, right? Like, he kind of talks about like everything is kind of no matter what happens in life, it's your fault. Let's figure out how to reverse this and make this a benefit for yourself, right? And we truly believe in that, right? Like, I don't remember ever complaining about a situation that I've ever been into. It's almost like inherently it is. How do we get out of this, right? But for me, it's very difficult to understand when other people go out there and complain, and I don't really understand how do you deal with that? How do you deal, especially with people that you dearly love? How do you help them to cross over and say, you know what, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not all bad, and things like that.
Well, I mean, I don't even think you should be concerned with the light or the dark at the end of the tunnel or anything to do with the tunnel. I think you should enjoy the journey and just have gratitude for the fact that you're alive. Like, when you look at like the probability of you being alive during this period of time, like, consider the amount of consider the probability of you being born, of all humans who've ever lived, being born before what's it called? Antibiotics, and being born after antibiotics. Like, there are certain periods of time throughout history where the mortality rate for women giving birth was 10%, more than 10%. Like you had a 1 in 10 chance of dying during childbirth. And then there was another point up to the year 1850 where over 50% of people under the age of 5, or over 50% of the Earth's population died before the age of 5. Like infant mortality was massively high. These are things we don't even consider now because of the advances in health. We just don't even consider these things, how incredibly fortunate we are. Like, guys, I mean, just consider this. Like, I pay for the Zoom account, but like a lot of people use Zoom for free. We're beaming a signal onto a satellite we didn't pay for that's going up there at 186,282 miles a second and then coming back to you at that speed of light. And we're doing it for free, and we're telecommunicating, and at the same time we're on YouTube streaming this whole thing with zero latency whatsoever. And a few people could be watching, or 4 billion people could be watching. And like just the level of gratitude you should have for the fact that it's like, hey, I want to fly to just consider you live in Miami and you want to go to Portland. Your ancestors would most likely have died on that trek. You know what I'm saying? With a horse and carriage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you're going to fly. You're going to complain because you have to fly Spirit Airlines, and they charge you extra for overweight bags.
And the
you're
seat's
flying
small as shit.
But you're flying at 560 knots. VFR or like IFR direct over to Portland, Oregon, and then you land and you get off there, and it's like you're complaining because your Uber took too long to get there. Like you have no concept of how fortunate you are. And so for me, that's kind of the thing that helps you.
Should just be grateful for now. Forget about the tunnel, like you're saying, for later. Grateful for now. You're here now. Do that. Be grateful for that.
Hey, Michael. So this actually was perfect because you talked about satellites and beaming signals up and down. We saw your conversation with Zerk, and Zerk is a big flat earther. Like obviously, we understand that it's a globe. It's round. That's why it's called it's a globe. Right?
Yeah, we're not gonna come at you.
I just did a podcast the other day, and one of the things I had these two people. They were both, I want to say 19, 20 years old, maybe 21 years old. And one of the things I talked about was 4% of millennials, because of the things I just talked about before, because we get further and further away from the survival scenario, people have the privilege of believing in whatever they want. So it becomes feels over reals. Your feelings, because you're not in a survival scenario, your feelings now become reality because you don't have to like kill the gazelle or like live hand to mouth anymore. You don't have to deal with objective reality. So you can, do some drugs, get drunk, whatever, and then you start whatever feels right. And one of the things that feels right is like, oh, I know something that the rest of the world doesn't know. And so what you're seeing is a growing number of millennials that believe that the earth is flat. It's like 4% of millennials actually consider the possibility that the earth is flat. Well, I said this to these two guys who are perfectly in that age group. They're actually younger than that. And the male host on there absolutely told me, he goes, but it is flat. Like
he was dead serious
in a way. But bro, he said it in a way like, how dare you even question that it's flat? It's obviously flat. And he goes, wow, you don't believe we landed on the moon? And like part of me wanted to punch him, dude. Because like, if you want to have a debate about us landing on the moon, I totally understand the skepticism. I don't understand the skepticism about the Earth being round. But the thing about landing on the moon is that what happened is the people who know we landed on the moon, a lot of them have died, and they're not on social media. They're older, and this happened over 50 years ago. And so the people who are just like heavy moon landing people are like, maybe the biggest one would be like Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson is like in his late 50s, early 60s, and he's just like not on social media debating like people like Zerka. Okay, so there's no count. It's almost like saying there's like no lobby that's really pro us landing on the moon. There's not enough people who understand how we landed on the moon, so they just watch YouTube videos. And also the concept is not offensive enough to where YouTube is going to take the content down. Right. Whereas like if you denied that whole terrible thing that happened in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, if you deny that, they will take that down off YouTube. But if you talk about the moon landing didn't happen, that's just fun skepticism. It doesn't hurt anyone.
Right. It doesn't have any hate instilled towards anybody or anything like that.
It really doesn't for most of them. But then later on when it's like, no, it's the baby eating Illuminati that faked the moon landings, and you're like, okay, all right. Now
or the lizard people that live under Antarctica. Which one?
Don't even come at me with that, bro.
Live under Antarctica. Like, it's so funny because they won't admit it, but like if you really push them, they do believe in that lizard people shit. Like for some of you watching this are like, what is he talking about? There's these videos that come out where like you can see people drinking water and they swallow in a certain way, and they do this video editing stuff to make these people like look lizard-like, and then they start saying that certain people in the
who was it?
Clicking
Hillary Clinton, they believe Hillary Clinton is like
Zuckerberg
secretly
too,
a lizard.
right? They were talking about Zuckerberg.
Yeah, and my whole thing is like man, what happened in your life to where like success was so unimportant that you understand how invested you have to be. Two things: you have to be super invested in this idea to give it credence in your mind, to like allow it to grow in your mind. And number two, how do you have that much free time to look up concepts of lizard people, but not concepts debunking lizard people? like so many of these things where like the debunking, like for instance, the directed energy weapons causing the fire in Maui. No, just arsonists could do that. Why do I need directed energy weapons? I could just pay a guy to start a fucking fire. It was like so stupid. People don't even like think like what the reality could be, and they don't look at the Chinese hacked the F-35 that crashed in North Carolina. No, it didn't. That's not what happened at all. Like, it's very clear what happened, but it's just one of these things where like you spend so much time looking for videos that validate your conspiracy theory. You spend no time, like, again, flat Earth doesn't exist if you spend any time studying why the Earth isn't flat. But it only works in a vacuum, like meaning you only have to look at things your way. So the funny thing is, well, what does it have to do with our conversation? That also works with like things like feminism or communism. Those things don't exist in reality unless you only believe in those things. Like, for instance, very similar, like what you saw in communist China under Mao Zedong, or what you saw with communist Russia.
I grew up in it. Yeah, I grew up in communist
in those
Russia.
Cases, it wasn't even like questioning the dogma. It was like the fact that you questioned the dogma took you to the Lubyanka and got you shot in the back of the head. And so that was the difference. It was like you can't even question the concept that there could be a question of this reality. Then that's anti-Leninist, anti-Marxist ideas, and then you would get shot. And so it's the same kind of situation where it's like feels over reals. But you have to, in order for communism to have worked, you have to look at it in a vacuum, meaning you can't look at the opposite of communism, which is free market capitalism. Because if you did that, then you'd see communism doesn't work. You can't look at the idea of feminism, like a fifth wave feminism, not initial feminism, like first wave feminism. I actually agree with it. Like women should be able to vote. I agree with that. Men should not be able to murder their wives. Men should not be able to rape their wives. Like those concepts, I absolutely agree with. Women should have an ability to be in the workforce if they choose so. Women should be able to go to college. I agree with that. That's first wave feminism. That's what the suffragettes. Fifth wave feminism is the concept of like every man is a potential rapist just because he has testicles. Like that, I have a serious issue with that. And then the idea that like I choose to have boundaries around my life and I'm a little bit more assertive because I have 17 times as much testosterone as a woman, therefore I'm toxic. I have a problem with that. So those things don't exist unless you're in a vacuum and you don't debate. So what you'll find is a lot of times when you're dealing with people like that, they aren't willing to debate.
No, they're not.
The
reason why
I couldn't fathom how Zerko was telling you, like he couldn't even understand field of view, he was just all those points blown overhead. Like when you're telling him about the curvature
I think you could
of the
understand.
Earth,
It's just
and like you're telling him like I get that you take a panoramic photo, and you compress it, you can see it at what was it? They're saying 80,000 feet,
it's so
but
crazy.
It
like, but hold on. The problem is that concept takes that concept takes 3 steps. I have to go to 275,000 feet. So just for those of you who don't know, it's like when can you see the curvature of the Earth? People are like, well, I can see it in the airplane. No, you can't. You cannot see the Earth's curvature with your normal human eyes until you're up to 275,000 feet, 260,000, somewhere around there. So when you're at 375,000 feet, you're in space. 260,000, you can see the curvature of the Earth. Okay. Now the problem is planes don't fly anywhere near that height. But if you're up at like 100,000 feet, which most planes won't go up there, you can get military planes up there. In your field of vision, if you took a panoramic photo and compressed it, you would clearly see a curve.
Right.
But the problem is like that, what I just explained required 3 levels of complexity. Therefore, flat earthers just throw it out because it's complicated.
So
that's
just
the way it works.
I don't find it complicated at all. I don't get it. Like field of view,
it was
right?
crazy. It was like
135.
So
like I don't get
But
it.
just to give a little tidbit here, you actually do have all your courses necessary. Is it an astrology or astrophysics minor?
So yeah. I'm going to be a little technical here. I have a degree in management information systems from the University of Texas at Austin, which means I have a bachelor's degree from the business school at UT Austin. The business school at UT Austin will allow you a major and a minor in the business school. I took upper division astronomy classes because my intent initially was to switch my major to astronomy and the natural sciences, but I didn't. I ended up staying with my major in business. And so I took a ton of astronomy courses. So I had the requirements for a minor in astronomy. However, the Macomb School of Business at UT Austin would not allow me to have a minor outside of business school. Therefore, I don't technically have a minor in astronomy, even though I know more than most people who have a minor in astronomy.
And on top of that, you were also in Air Force, right? Like you
Yes.
actually flown planes. It's not that you're just saying random things.
Yeah, they have a hard time with that because one of the myths that the
That's
flat
my
earthers say is
favorite
that
one is the planes, man.
GPS doesn't work over the Pacific. I love this one. GPS doesn't work over the Pacific. Yes, it does. I've flown GPS over the Pacific. It works. There isn't even 1% loss of coverage over the Pacific. Why? Because we're flying over satellites. You know what's funny? I didn't want to make this all about flat earthers, but flat earthers like can't explain how you can fly from one place to another in the southern hemisphere because in their map, the southern hemisphere is like 3 times the area of the northern hemisphere. It's the outer ring. It's what they consider the southern hemisphere. And so the distances from like say Australia to South America to South Africa would be outrageous. They'd be like 20-hour-long flights. But of course, they're like, well, how come it doesn't take 20 hours for Qantas Flight 63 to go from Sydney, Australia to Johannesburg, South Africa? It only takes like 14 hours. And they're like, well, it's because there's 1,000-mile-an-hour headwinds. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, bro? He goes, 1,000-mile-an-hour headwinds. So you're breaking the speed of sound. Like, it's just absurd. And then I'm like, well, you said that there's satellites up there, and the satellites are the reason why we're able to use GPS. Not satellites, balloons, weather balloons. Like, wouldn't the weather balloons get caught up in the 1,000-mile-an-hour headwinds? And they have no answer. They have no answer because they haven't thought that far. It's just madness. And other people like listen to me and like, why do you even argue with these people? And the reason why is one of the main concepts of, well, I said this at the beginning of your podcast. One of the main concepts of my show is I want to like define objective reality and then present objective reality to you and hope that it offends you and then watch you squirm and wiggle while I express to you objective reality and then you try to explain to me. Like again, I had this one guy trying to explain to me that Adolf Hitler wasn't a eugenicist and did not hate the Jews, and I like showed him all these fucking unequivocal proofs that was true, and just watching him like, yeah, but the Illuminati and the Matrix made that up, and I'm like, bro, like it's just madness when you see this, like watching them squirm. But that's kind of, I don't know why I get off on it so much, but I like starting from a very based place and then going outwards and find people who are very emotional and then just watching them squirm. The one I'm probably most famous for is the female delusional calculator. I didn't make the female delusional calculator. I just use it on my show all the time. And basically I ask women, how much do they think the average man in America makes? And they say 70,000, 150,000. It's like, no, it's $39,000 a year. And they're like, what? That's the average man makes that much. And you're like, how tall is the average guy? They're like 6'2", 6'3". I'm like, no, he's 5'9". Like, then they're like, what? They don't understand. And then we start asking them to describe their perfect man. And of course, their perfect man, you guys know, he's 6'1". He makes $150,000 a year.
6'6",
he's not obese. Right? He's not obese. He's never been married. Blah blah blah. You know, and I go over all these demographics, and he's like somewhere between 25 and 45 years old. So I take these demographics, I put them into a U.S. Census calculator, and we try to figure out how many men are like that. And it's like 0.02% of men are in that category, and the women are like, what? It's like, yes, yeah. Every time you've had sex with one of those guys, just know he's sleeping with like 7 other girls. And then they don't understand.
They present themselves and they make up 20 to 50% of it and think there's some kind of exclusion, right? We do the opposite. Yeah. So for instance, because the 3 of us most likely do not care about a woman's income or height. So because we don't care about income or height, the number of women that we have to choose from is like 14 to 17 to 20% of the population, where they have to choose from 0.2% of the population.
Yeah.
And that's why you see a large, like a small group of men at the top that have like 100. There's multiple studies. You have to put this all together, but one study that shows that men under the age of 30, about 26% of them are virgins. The average man in the United States has had something like 5 or 6 sexual partners in his whole life. So from 0 to 26, we'll just say 0. I'm extrapolating here. From 0 to 26, we're ranking men by body count. From 0 to 26, the first 26 percentile, they're at 0. When we get to the 50th percentile, they're at 5. And then when we get to the top 5% over here, they're at 150. So like for men, it goes like this, and then it goes whoop. That's what body count looks like for men. For women, it's way more linear.
So now,
again, go ahead.
You're talking about this. This is evolutionary psychology, and probably the most prominent person right now is Dr. David Buss, right? And I think you might have had him on your show, right? Mm-hmm. And I think he has mentioned that evolutionary psychology is probably one of the easiest sciences to disprove. However, to this date, no one was able to do that.
Correct. Yeah. So the term is falsifiable. It's so when I go out, like astrology is not falsifiable. right? If I go to astrologer and be like, hey, just let you know, we've done these studies and we've shown that like Aries and Gemini just don't get along, or they do get along, and there's no correlation with reality whatsoever. They're like, no, but you don't understand. You have to look at this and this with the air sign and blah, blah, blah. There's so much bullshit. Numerology is the same way. There's always an escape route, so it's not falsifiable. Because evolutionary psychology is psychology is not what's considered a hard science. Psychology is like tendencies. Like, for instance, Sigmund Freud, great mind, terrific author, but he made a lot of hypotheses that turned out to be incorrect. Yeah. Now, so when you look at that situation with Freud, you say, well, it's not a hard science. It turns out he believed that homosexuality came from the fact that children were stuck in a phallic state around the age of 12, and because they never got out of it, they became gay, whatever. Turns out none of that was true. But so because of that, because it's a lot of hypotheses that weren't really tested, it's considered a soft science. A hard science would be like physics. What happened was, in the 1970s, somebody just finally grew a ball sack and said, hey, why don't we just test some of these theories that we have, like hard science? And they did so. And the first, I think the term originally was sociobiology, and then later on they called it evolutionary psychology, which is a derivative of evolutionary biology. Evolutionary biology is the clear and obvious concept that natural selection is the reason why everything from the neck down happens for Homo sapiens. We have opposable thumbs because we're supposed to use tools. We walk in a bipedal manner so that we were long distance hunters. We have sweat glands because we're long distance hunters. We have kneecaps in our knees. I don't know, some primates don't have kneecaps. Because we were supposed to walk up and down for long distances, and we have a ball and socket joint so that we could throw objects overhand, so to like throw spears. Well, obviously Homo sapiens were evolved to be long distance hunters. Homo sapiens can walk longer distances than almost any mammal on the planet. So we knew that, but the concept of natural selection for the head from the neck up was sort of ignored because of things like religion. Right, religion was like, no, our brain is created and it was destined by God. And it's like, no, the reality of the situation is natural selection includes the brain as well. And a lot of people don't like that idea, because what does that mean? Does that mean we have free will? It means we don't have free will. It means that our proclivities come from our ancestors' desires for certain things. So like our ancestors who chose to mate with people who had unsymmetrical faces and were morbidly overweight, those did not bear them healthy children, and therefore those children did not have children. But our ancestors who looked for a girl with a fat ass and nice tits and had a pretty face, right, and signs of youth, those ancestors who mated with women who looked like that were far more likely to have children who had children. And so that what happens is that cycle happens over time and time again, and then men have preferences for certain attributes with women, which would include like a 0.7 hip to waist ratio, signs of youth, signs of facial symmetry, clear skin, things like agreeableness. These things come from evolutionary psychology, and women are far more concerned in every society with a man's ability to procure resources and his shoulder to waist ratio and his masculine signs on his face or whatever. Like women are not concerned if a man has a scar on his face, not anywhere near to the point where men are concerned when it comes to women. So because of that, we see that where these proclivities come from. And instead of the clear and obvious understanding that this comes from evolution, the belief we'll go back to the feminists, is that this is some sort of nefarious patriarchy where we created these beauty standards specifically to chastise women. One of my favorite things, it's a book by Gadsad, I believe it's The Parasitic Mind. He goes into this conversation where the idea of pornography and the idea of strip clubs were created specifically to persecute women, and then it was Dr. Sad clearly said, it's like, then what are great gay strip clubs for?
Yeah,
like no, it's like men go to strip clubs to look at a variety of sexual partners, if they're gay or straight. It has nothing to do with the patriarchy, right? So when you can explain these things through evolution, then it kind of throws a lot of like basic feminist dogma out the window. And so that's the reason why, like, it's really weird. So Dr. David Buss should have won a Nobel Prize for his 1989 study on 37 different cultures, but he'll never win a Nobel Prize because the evolutionary psychology is like, it's an explanation of how we were as cave people. And that includes our proclivities for like, sexual aggression, and, why people are tribalistic, which can lead to racism, stuff like that. Why people are believe in heuristics, or why people are so obsessed with status. Where do these things come from? Well, they come from our ancestors. And when you look at that, it doesn't fit with a very woke egalitarian narrative that a lot of people want to fit into the world today. So the people on the left don't like evolutionary psychology because it has a clear definition for gender roles previously, like 50,000 years ago. It doesn't mean there have to be gender roles today. You can do whatever you want today. But our ancestors were not confused about the gender roles. Our ancestors did not have the man picking berries while the woman hunted. That just didn't happen. Extremely rare that would happen. Maybe the man was injured or something. So the people on the left don't like evolutionary psychology because of the explanation of gender roles. The people on the right don't like evolutionary psychology because they don't like the concept of evolution. Mm-hmm. They don't like the idea that we are the descendants of a primate, which we are. We are hairless murder apes. And I will tell you guys something else. When you give into this idea that we're hairless murder apes and that we're just a product of 178 million years of mammalian evolution, you really and then you take that hypothesis and then you just look at the world, fucking everything makes sense.
Yeah.
Everything makes sense. Why she stood you up, why she fucked that other dude, why these people watch this advertisement, why this guy made so much money, why this sales technique works, why this guy wanted to work for you, why this guy quit, why this guy cheated on you. All of it makes sense when you just look at the world through the lens of evolutionary psychology. And by the way, it's 100 for 100. I've never seen it wrong. Not one time have I ever seen a concept where I was like, this doesn't make sense in the concept of evolution. Nothing. Absolutely. Because anything that is pervasive amongst Homo sapiens must exist somewhere in the realm of evolution.
Didn't Kanazawa, Asian American evolutionary psychologist, get canceled for some of his research? Didn't they remove
Kanazawa.
Satoshi Kanazawa? There you go. Yeah, they remove his? They took his tenure back, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, so it's really funny. He was maybe a decade ahead of his time. If he tried to do that now, he'd be fine. I think he'd be a huge social media celebrity. Basically, Satoshi Kanazawa was trying to be what GADSAT is now, but he just really got hit by the woke mob before there was a woke mob. I'll tell you what happened. So basically, we can talk about this now.
It's testosterone levels, right?
No, there was that. I think, don't quote me on this because the study's down now. I can't find it.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, what happened with Satoshi Kanazawa, and I got to go back and look this up. I believe, and I actually know Dr. Kanazawa. He messaged me every once in a while, every couple of years he'll write me or whatever. We'll talk. I'm still trying to get him on the podcast.
Have you had GADSAT on the podcast?
No,
sorry, I'm segueing on this one.
It's so weird. No, the thing with GADSAT, the problem is this, right? So Rollo's one of my best friends.
Uh-huh.
Rollo will alienate some people because of his hostile beliefs about stuff, and I get kind of caught up in it. If GADSAT had any concept of how much stuff I've studied his work, he would do my podcast in a second. But because someone probably, Hafiz from the roommates, probably warned him to not go on with Rollo Tomasi, and because I'm associated with Rollo, that's probably why GADSAT isn't going to come on, and probably why I'm going to have a hard time getting Chris Williamson on because of those things.
Because I know PBD.
But the trade-off is worth it. Go ahead.
Because I know PBD is a pretty good friends with him, and I know you've met PBD before several times, right? I've
messaged GADSAT. Dr. Sad's written me back several times.
Gotcha.
He's like, I don't really have time right now. And then he did the roommates, and I was like, you're gonna do the roommates?
Yeah,
you won't do my show.
Hafiz,
they don't know.
really?
They don't even know what evolutionary psychology is. Yeah. I watched Hafiz go on Saucecast and totally misquote Dr. Buss. And I was like, how is this possible? And then I asked Dr. Buss to reach out to GADSAT, who did, and then GADSAT wrote me back and said, I'm not doing podcasts right now. He goes, because there's a lot of heat on me right now. So I think what happens is erroneously, not through no fault of my own, other than my association with some of these red pill content creators, a lot of people who don't like alt-right content won't come on my show because they don't watch my show. People who watch my show understand I'm pretty politically moderate. Here's the middle, right? And then so just to the right of middle would be me, Sauce, and Patrick Bet-David. Just a little bit further to the right of that would be like Rollo, and then far out to the right of that is Myron. You know what I'm saying? Myron Gaines and those guys, Pearl and those people. And then far out to the right of that would be Nick Fuentes and fucking Alex Jones, and that would be far alt-right. I'm barely to the right of center. And the reason why I'm right of center is because I was left of center 20 years ago, but the world has gotten so far left that I'm just I've kept my values. And as the world shifted left and I was just left behind, I just became a conservative. Does that make sense?
You didn't move the scale,
100%. Yeah, that 100% makes sense because that has happened to me. Because you kind of, when you come in, you're a liberal, you're okay with the situation. And then there's a time when you're like, I don't understand what the fuck's going on. The world is changing and I don't get this. This makes no sense
Your
to
ideologies
me.
didn't, the scales did.
Yeah, no. Like the scales change. Like for instance, the concept of like a man and two men getting married. If they want to be happy and do that, it didn't make any difference to me. I would say like 25 years ago. Let's say I was 20 years old. Okay, they want to get married. That's fine. I don't really have an issue with that. Is it offensive to my religious beliefs as a Protestant? Not really. They're just not getting married in my church, so I don't give a fuck. You know, good neighbors make good fences. I don't give a fuck. Like, or good fences make good neighbors. They can do their thing. I can do mine. It made no difference to me. And then the concept of like I grew up and I'd be around guys who grew up in a really shitty neighborhood. So I watched racial profiling amongst police department because I lived in Dallas, Texas, which is the most segregated city in America. Let me say that again. Dallas, Texas is the most segregated city in America. Not Jackson, Mississippi, not Atlanta, Georgia. It is Dallas, Texas. There was specific redlining that happened in that city where black people lived in certain neighborhoods and white people lived in others, and that has not changed in the last 50 years. And so I would go to my friend's place and like down like Martin Luther King and X-Line, like in the South Dallas. And it was very clear to me that the police treated my friends who did nothing wrong very differently than they treated me. That shit was real. And I saw it with my own eyes. And so for me, I was like, well, I kind of believed in an egalitarian nature. I believe we needed to stop police brutality. I didn't like the idea of like property taxes paying for public education because it just caused poor people to go to poor schools and then continue the cycle of poverty. So these things I understood. So I was a bit of a political progressive. And then the world changed. And then all of a sudden, like we're teaching 9-year-olds to change their gender. And I was like, stop, just stop. What the fuck? Stop. This is ridiculous. This is absurd. And then it was like the denial of science was something that was exclusive to the right because they believed in the Bible. And then what happened was when we started getting into gender politics, now the denial of science is on the left. The left is now denying science. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then things just got really weird. And I was like, no, I'm a conservative now. Like apparently I'm a conservative just because I believe in normal. Like I believe in God. Therefore, as long as you allow me to worship in freedom, like our forefathers intended, then I'm good. If you don't want to worship, I have no problem with you. Just you stay on. Again, you guys know the neighborhoods in Texas that have the lowest crime rate. Do you know what these neighborhoods have in common?
Were they religious?
No. The households own 2 or more firearms. In neighborhoods where households legally own 2 or more firearms, the crime rate is 0. Guys, good fences make good neighbors. Understanding boundaries is what makes the world work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
It's really, that's like, I love my neighbors, but I just don't need them to watch me take a poop. You know, like where there needs to be boundaries. And so when you understand these boundaries, then everything's fine. I am for everyone being able to do anything they want as long as you are not like defaming people or touching kids. Then do whatever the fuck you want. I really don't care. Okay.
So what bothers me is you know, life is sort of, I look at it as game of chess. Game of chess has rules, and you can abide by these rules, and then within the game itself you can create your own rules, right? Whether you know your pawn is going to move this way or the other way, you're creating your own rules within the system of rules. It just so happens that I see on the left they want to create their own separate game of chess and call it game of chess and say your game of chess is completely wrong. This is the correct game of chess, and you should play this.
Yeah, politics has always been like that. I'm not just going to just blame liberals. Conservatives have done the same thing before.
Right.
That's not really the issue. The issue is specifically like, does your game of chess lead to an outcome that is realistic, or does for instance, does your game of chess from a political standpoint or from an incentive standpoint lead people down a path where that's I'll give you an example. If you cut taxes for big businesses, you encourage more people to move their business to the United States. Mm-hmm. The other countries did this. So Panama did this, United Arab Emirates did this, Monaco did this.
Uruguay, Paraguay. I think Uruguay and Paraguay right now are trending because of that.
Yeah. And so because of that, people wanted to move. They were incentivized to move their business there. In the state of California, the state income tax, I believe, is like 13%. In Texas, it's 0. So you saw this mass exodus of people leaving.
We experienced the same thing in Florida. We experienced the same in Florida, yeah.
Yeah, you see this like 13%. When you make $1 million a year, dude, that is $130,000. That's real money. I don't care how rich you are. Mm-hmm. That's another property you could put a down payment on. That's a lot of money, dude. Even if you're super rich, $130,000 means something. Okay.
It's a Porsche. So let's be honest. Yeah, it's a Porsche. It's a brand new Porsche.
But hold on. But it's a Porsche today. But compound interest, it's $1 million. Yeah. Down the road. It's another $1 million. So like that's why people who understand money grasp this idea of like excessive taxation. So does your politics allow for people like if your politics allows for people, like say job security, you ensure like certain industries, you're not allowed to fire your employees, unless you have a certain cause. Well, that causes my employees to not want to work hard because they know they're not going to get fired. If I do a situation like there's a debate right now, and I actually don't know where I stand on this. I'm going to interview James Sexton, the divorce lawyer, a divorce attorney, about this. The concept of no-fault divorce. Does no-fault divorce actually encourage women to file for divorce more? Does it? Because it doesn't allow for a cool down period. So that's a really interesting concept to have. So does your belief system allow for human incentive, or does it ignore human incentive? One of the best books ever written on this, super controversial, is the book called Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, written in 1961 or 64, I forgot what year. Maybe 61. And when she writes the book, it's basically the concept. I'm sorry to give it away, but the book's been out for 50 years now, 60 years. At the end of the book, all the wealthy, productive people move into like this little ravine in Colorado where nobody can find them. And then the Los Angeles, New York, all these other cities, they just black out. Like they lose power. All the productive people have left and created their own society. And all the lazy people that are full of groupthink and communist ideals, they just ran society into the ground. Well, that's basically what happened.
Well, that makes sense. It's just another thing that kind of, that I don't necessarily want to say that it gets me mad is when you create a company, you're doing something, and then somebody comes in and says, well, you need to pay me more. Well, wait a minute. You signed on a dotted line. Why should I pay you more? This is a business that I've created, and you work for me.
Yeah.
So by you pushing out there, it's just kind of what UAW is doing right now with all the car companies, right? The GM and the Fords. And I mean, you've signed on a dotted line. Like, you want me to pay you $50 to put a sticker on the side of the door? That makes no sense to me. You know what I mean?
So here's the thing. Those people have the right to ask for more under our current system.
Yeah,
I have
of
no
course.
problem with them asking for more. What I have a problem is the government mandating I pay them more. That's the first problem. But secondly, so I need skilled salespeople. I will say this all day, every day, on every podcast I go to. I have my sales team is 10 people right now. I wish it was 40. We've interviewed 800 people just to find 10 guys that can work for me, because being a high ticket salesperson is a very difficult, unique skill set. Okay. I am fully aware. I hope none of my guys are watching this. I'm fully aware if somebody came over there and just like saying, hey, we're going to offer you double commissions if you leave Michael Sartain and go do this, they have the right to leave. They're not, they're W-9 employees. So like they have the right to leave. I don't want them to leave, but I understand in a free market economy, I have to compete with other people. As long as the rules are the same for everyone and the government doesn't stick their dick in my business, then I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that because I have a good product and people want to work for me because I think I'm a pretty good boss. If somebody wants to come and try to poach my people, which has happened before, it wasn't a bad thing. It's usually the underperformers in my company get poached by other companies, and they don't do very well. A lot of times, people try to funnel hack my business because we grew from 40K to 500K a month, and they want to know how we were able to do that. So they'll hire like the low-hanging fruit on my sales team sometimes away, and they'll try to like reverse engineer what we did, but it doesn't work because they don't have our community, they don't have our accountability, they don't have our feedback that we have in our community. So, so from those type of situations, as long as it's free and it's fair for everyone, then I don't care. As long as it's fair for everyone, I enjoy situations like this that encourage competition. And so that's, again, the reason why I'm a capitalist, the reason why I'm a conservative is because I enjoy competition. I think that being able to compete to make a lot of money is great. Should we have a social safety net? I didn't mean to get so far into politics, but should we have a social safety net? Absolutely. Should we have a social safety net equal to what they have in Norway and Sweden? I think that's a bit too much. I think it's a bit too much. I think it's
They do have the largest endowment fund, right? Like a public loan endowment fund. Norway. They thought when they found oil, they thought they're just gonna buy a pair of shoes for each one of the people, and now it's worth I think it's $250,000 per each person that lives in Norway. I think that's how big the endowment fund.
If you get, and by the way, in the UAE they could do that too,
because
the profits from the federal government there, which is from shipping, are enough to pay for all the federal expenditures, so there's no taxes there. There's no federal income tax. It's fantastic if you can pull it off. It would be like the state of Texas discovering so much oil that all college students there went to college for free and nobody paid taxes for anything. That'd be incredible if we could do that. We can't really do that, though. Most places can't do that. Their government expenditures are too high in order to be able to pull that off. Anyway, we're getting into like meta stuff for politics, but we're having a discussion where no one's insulting each other and we're being realistic about where the money comes and where the money goes. A lot of times when you talk to liberals, they're just like, yeah, just more money. It's like, well, we're going to deflate the currency. Yeah, just more money. We'll just print more money.
So
we'll just spend more money.
That was the thing with with the stimulus checks and then raising the minimum minimum wage, which I understand it's needed as time goes by. You kind of do these things, but then what happens if the companies know that you have more money? The milk goes up in price, the gas goes up in price because they know they can take more of it. So it makes no sense. Like, yeah, raise the minimum, but it doesn't mean that the company is going to value their products at the same price. They're most likely going to raise it. Now you have inflation.
Yeah, so one of the things a lot of people are going to be shocked that I believe this. I do believe in a minimum wage. The reason why is because one of the things that we do in the United States is we have the ability to exploit people in other countries that have extremely low standards of living. And so humans in this country will not, like, if we could, we would let illegal immigrants into this country, pay them $3 an hour, and then have them work at all the fast food restaurants and basically take Americans, they just wouldn't have a job. You do need a minimum wage. I don't have a problem with a minimum wage. What I have a problem with a $50 an hour minimum wage like they're doing in Seattle, Washington. That's absurd. Like, stuff like that is like, that is beyond, like, now at some point I'm working at McDonald's making more than the average, like, income for the average human being. Like, that doesn't make sense. I just wouldn't open a McDonald's there. You know what I'm saying? You saw like some of these places where there was looting and rioting because of these protests that happened during the pandemic. A lot of like Walmarts and CVS's just shut down and left those neighborhoods, as they should. Because like I said, as long as it's fair for everyone and the free market economy is allowed to thrive, then I'm totally fine with that. As long as it's fair for everyone, as long as it's the same for everyone, then I don't have an issue with it. Like, when I say fair, you don't have equality of outcomes, but you could have an equality of beginning. Like, I do believe primary education for kids that grow up in poor neighborhoods should be drastically increased from where it is now, because they should have a chance. But I don't believe in this idea that because you're physically weaker or not as not as intelligent as me, you should have the same outcome I do. I don't believe in that at all. Well, we need to incentivize smart people to invent smart things so that we have Uber and Tesla. Otherwise, we end up like punishing people for being achievers.
Well, you mentioned earlier that there's no such thing as, like, I think a lot of people forget that 70% of the first generation or 90% of the second generation is going to lose all the money that parents have made, right?
Yes.
So with that being said, I mean, it doesn't matter how much money does that have. If as a matter of fact, if the second generation or the third generation survives and keeps that money, they're probably 3 times more intelligent than the parents were to be able to keep this money.
Yeah. Well, it depends. It is a pretty common trope that, like, the second generation, because they don't have an understanding of like how the money was made, they lose the ability to they end up losing the money. They end up, they don't want to work, so they find some get rich quick scheme that ends up costing them everything, I mean, it sucks, but that's something that's sometimes the reality. But I mean, if I tell this to my clients all the time, if there's one thing I could bestow upon them, like one gift I could give them that would, above everything else, it's having money and making money. The ability to make money is more valuable than having money. Because here I have money, but I don't necessarily have gratitude, and I didn't learn anything. Here, because I'm learning how to make money, I have money and I have gratitude and I learned a skill. So this is better to me. A guy who just does nothing and gets a ton of hot girls, and a guy who has to like build himself up to get a ton of hot girls and becomes attractive. This guy right here, he's just always been a 6'3" Chad and does no work at all, and he doesn't grow as a human, and he actually becomes like a little bit of like jaded towards women because of this. This guy like takes every single thing. Like, I probably shouldn't say this on your show, but I don't give a fuck. I love having threesomes.
Yeah,
I never
you should say
hope
it's okay.
to God, if I become a deca billionaire, guys, if I become a deca billionaire, I hope I never get to the point where I ever take for granted that I'm having a threesome. Every time I have a threesome, it's fucking great. I never want to get to a point. I never want to get to a point where it's like, oh fuck, another three. If I get to that point, I will go work at Walmart. Seriously, I will go live on the street. I will do something to reset my dopamine levels. I will go camp in the woods. If I ever have such a low level of gratitude that like having a threesome is passe and boring to me, I need to reset the whole fucking thing. You know what I'm saying?
So with MOA, how did MOA start? Because I know you blew up because you were posting a bunch of videos with extremely hot women, and I think that's how you blew up, right? But then the initial idea of going into MOA wasn't that. It's almost like, I think you've mentioned this before, where you kind of had to throw women in there for the guys to look serious at what you have to say. But your initial thought with MOA was because of these things that people believe in flat earth, because of these things that people believe in astrology and numerology and this nonsense science is out there. You kind of want to teach
5 love languages.
Yeah, the 5 languages or the vibes, you know, like I'm an asparagus. That's why I crashed the car, you know. So
Yeah.
the
Asparagus.
so well, I think you're trying to teach guys and how to become better men. Kind of like I think you've mentioned or someone else that there's this levers of like 20% looks, 20% this, 20 kind of like a
Yeah.
football player when you're building in a Madden, right? So how
Yeah.
did that come about? When did you like, you know what, enough is enough? I'm gonna just start a course. Like how did that all come about?
So if you want to like the origins of what I teach in MOA would probably go back to when I ended up working at a strip club back in like '01.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. Yeah, exactly.
So it would be just seeing that the world, my mother, Disney, and the church, not my mother, my family in general, taught me or tried to express to me some concept of you be nice to people and they'll be nice to you back. And then I remember I was working at Gentlemen's Club, and I would go back in the dressing room and I would just listen to the women talk, and it was fascinating to me. Guys, I'm 22. These are the hottest women I've ever. Again, one more time. Let me caveat this. I'm 22 years old.
Was this before Air Force?
That's me right now.
Yeah, way before. Yeah, I didn't go to the Air Force until 26.
Okay.
But like, guys, I'm not like I wasn't dating playmates back then. I was just like a dude who had graduated from high school a couple years before. I'm 22, 23 years old. I'm working at a strip club. At the time, like now, they would not be the hottest women I've ever seen. Then, those were the hottest women I'd ever seen. I'm in the dressing room and I'm listening to them talk, and it was very clear that they would complain about a man and then sleep with the man they were complaining about. They would talk about a dude cheating on them and go back to the guy who was cheating on them. They would sit there and say things and then do completely the opposite of the things they said. And I listened to it over and over again. And that was sort of like my red pill moment, which ironically was the same time it was happening for Rolo, because that's when he started posting on SoSwap forums around the same time that I came to this discovery. This Men of Action is something I was working on for probably 25 years. And I was coaching for free, not 25 years, 18, 19 years. I was coaching for free for probably from 2008 until 2019. I would go speak at people's seminars or whatever. And it was basically me trying to give back and give back the lessons that I wish someone had taught me. Like, for instance, I'll give you a lesson right now. I love the concept of guys going out and like meeting, like going up and cold approaching women, strange women or whatever. I like that idea because it gets you out of your head and it causes you to like not worry about rejection so much. But what happened is that turned into an industry where guys got super weird and uncalibrated, the pickup industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I did was I looked at what the pickup guys were saying, and then I looked at what the like club promoters were saying, and then I looked at pickup artists' results, and I look at club promoters' results. And I would meet these club promoters in Atlanta, and they'd have 6 girlfriends, and they'd go to the club, and 70 girls would show up. And I was like, I'm going to listen to these guys. I'm gonna listen. I stopped listening to pickup artists, and I started only like paying attention to guys who were just slaying it with women. Like dudes, it was like if they wanted to, 7 girls a week every week would not be difficult. Like those guys, and not particularly good-looking guys. Like just guys who just had their logistics figured out. And I reverse engineered what they were doing, and then I used that concept for basically everything. So my background in physics kind of got me to like understanding I have a hypothesis. I'm going to try to disprove the hypothesis, and I'm going to look for where these things might be right or wrong. And then I took that concept of scientific method and I took it to the dating realm, and that's where I came up with some of my hypotheses, and they worked for me. And I experimented with a lot of. I used Las Vegas as almost like a laboratory. And I experimented like what would happen if I did this instead of this. And so the concept that I came up with was the idea of why not have outrageous numbers of insanely hot female friends. Don't try to sleep with any of them. And then see how far I can push that. And I tell the guys this, I make it a challenge. I'm like, can you have 100 female friends? Well, the answer is, guys, no one can. Because what happens is once you get to 20, they start trying to sleep with you. These women will be like, how is this guy with so many fucking women? And you
Mate
start
choice
seeing
copying?
like girls like,
Talking about mate choice copying.
Yeah, exactly. Mate choice copying. Like you won't. Whenever I tell the guys, "Can you have 100 female friends?" They always get to like 6, and they're like, "Yeah, one of them wanted to sleep with me." I'm like, "Duh, I know, bro." Like that's always what's going to happen. But because the concept was totally ignored by pickup, that's another reason why I was just very critical of pickup. And then once I found that there was an actual professor teaching exactly what I was saying, mate choice copying, sexy sons hypothesis, and this concept of pre-selection, Dr. Buss, that's when I just delved into this. And then somebody finally told me, is like, when people pay for your coaching, you'll notice they're going to be a lot more invested. So once we started charging for MOA, I found better clients who got more improvement. It's like not how you would think, but like if somebody paid you $100,000 for you to coach them and you taught them stuff, they would listen to everything you said and they would take action every single time you asked them to. And so even though they paid more, they would get more results, and you wouldn't have to do more work, and they'd still get better results.
I think it's more
It was
incentivized just
one
because they paid.
Exactly. They take it more seriously because they have skin in the game. It is an incredible fucking phenomenon that happened, and I didn't really believe it until I saw it happen. And now, like, my top 50 guys now are better than anyone I coached before I started MOA.
I saw that you posted one of your more recent Instagram posts talking about a majority of women find only 20% of men attractive, and
Yes, dating apps.
going on through like the road to competence and stuff like that. I'm only 22, like I just mentioned, so I try to stay quiet, especially around guys like you and Jay, older than me, know a lot more. I want to learn. What is a good like the first book you would recommend to someone for the road to competence? Because I don't want to be a 40-year-old mook. You know what I mean? Like, so I like I said, I like to learn.
So what I recommend is go on my free school server. It's school.com men of action free / men of action free. There's a hyphen in between every word. I would go on the free school server or just write me on Instagram, and on there is the book list. And the book list, there's 30 books that I've added to the book list. The first ones I will tell you, as far as like being relevant, I love The One Thing by Gary Keller, and I love the How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and then I love Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Those would be kind of some places where I'd start. There's a ton. There's so many books I can't even.
Right. I get it.
It depends on what your issue is. If the issue is like, Michael, I have trouble concentrating and I have no gratitude, then the correct book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson and The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. If the problem is, hey, Michael, I'm very passive aggressive when I speak to people, and I just don't really, I don't like confrontation, then the correct book is Crucial Conversations by David Covey, I believe. And then it's going to be Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willink, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and Never Finished by David Goggins. Those would be the correct answers. Hey, Michael, I have some serious issues when it comes to like the concept of pre-selection. How does this work? I don't know if I believe in it. Then the correct answer is for you to read The Setup by Dan Bilzerian, and for you to read Very Important People by Ashley Mears. So there's the correct book is prescribed based on what it is that you're looking for. If you have like serious issues with, like, say, the concept of leadership, I would read the Operator by Robert O'Neill, and I would read Gates of Fire, which is the story about King Leonidas and the 300 that died at the Battle of Thermopylae in 483 BC. So that's what I would do. There's a specific prescription based on what the issue is.
Okay, I understand. Definitely understand.
So thank you for that. So Michael, Michael, right? Is that okay if we say Michael, not Mike? Okay, cool. So Eddie and I we're talking about this, and I know you being in the Air Force and whatnot. I'm sure you've seen the newest news of the Mexican aliens, which
Mexican / Peruvian,
which were technically Peruvian artifacts that they found, and then Peru is requesting these artifacts back because I don't know how they end up in Mexico. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's just, again, it's desperation to feel included and to feel special. Again, imagine if there were aliens and you were the first person to see them. You'd have this like feeling of superiority that things that other people don't know.
Right.
And so aliens is just a manifestation of flat Earth, didn't land on the moon, certain other conspiracies about this and that or whatever. Microchips in the vaccine. Water turns people homosexual, stuff like that. Like it's just like these conspiracies that happen. You feel special because you know this thing that other people don't know, and then the Matrix or whatever, they're not getting it right, and you actually know what the truth is. So it makes you feel like you're a part of this exclusive club. That's what Flat Earth is actually like. I didn't belong. Flat Earth shouldn't be called Flat Earth Society. It should be called I didn't belong somewhere and now I belong society. That's what it should be. Flat Earth is just a new place to belong. And so that's essentially what it is. And when you meet them, you can like, if you go back and you'll pinpoint, you're going to find a moment other than Zerka. I think Zerka's a total grift. I think Zerka's just doing it for attention.
Oh yeah, yeah. For views, yeah.
You see that, man?
Yeah, for sure. Like when Zerka like finds my arguments to be annoying because he doesn't believe the Earth is flat. That's the reason why. Or by the way, let me take that back. I don't think that Zerka doesn't believe the Earth is round. I think Zerka deep down doesn't care.
Yeah.
I think but I know he's.
I think
more
that's a
popular
better.
to his, yeah. I think deep down he's more popular to his audience when he says the Earth is flat. I read his comments. The majority of his audience doesn't think the Earth is flat.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's more compelling and interesting when he says the Earth is flat.
So just like you're talking about this, and then there's that other side of things, right? And you mentioned the calculator, right? The delusion calculator. There's that 66666, right? 6 pack abs, 6 foot tall. Now, there's this whole thing where back in the day, you kind of had to dodge a saber-toothed tiger. So you couldn't have been 6 foot tall because the tiger would have eaten you, right? And it's kind of been demonstrated with bonobos. When in the zoo, these bonobos grow like, the male bonobos select the other bonobos that have bigger asses, and like they look completely different. Where in the wild, they probably would not be able to run as fast, and the lion would eat them, right? So we don't have that anymore, right? Like there's no more of the saber-toothed tiger, no more you're gonna die. So there's still that 6 foot tall, like this arbitrary number of 6 foot tall, not so much in Europe or in South America, but there's that also that 1 meter 80 centimeter and then above, which is kind of what 6 foot is, right? Like where's that come into play? Like how does this make it really makes no sense to me scientifically. You know what I mean? How does this make sense to females?
Well, the height thing comes from, so one of the things is height is what's called an honest indicator. You can't really fake it. You can't now. People are having surgery on their tibias and fibulas and making themselves 3 inches taller, and they're wearing those shoes that make them taller. So like that, so you can definitely do it from that standpoint, but it's what's called an honest indicator, where I can lie about like things on social media. I can lie to you about how much money I have. Men can often lie about their sexual prowess, all kinds of things like that. There's certain things that are honest indicators that you can't lie about, and that is like a man's like physical attractiveness, and how tall he is like probably the main one. Right. How tall he is carries some genetic information that women want from the sexy sons hypothesis, so that they have tall children, so that other women find their tall children attractive. Also, men will have children with women, and their children will not be the same height as those men, but they will be taller. So this is the reason why women like men who are taller than average, so they can have children that are taller than average. Once you get above 6'3", you start seeing diminishing returns. At 6'6", it starts to really plummet. Like women don't really want men who are 6'7". Most women don't. Once you get to that height, you start having like, there's certain problems, like quality of life issues. I'm not like, unless you like want to date an NBA player, once you get to like 7'1", we're like, it starts to really fall off. Like a lot of women just don't want to date a guy who's 7 feet tall. So it just gets to that point where it's just like too big, right?
I find a small caveat in this, and sorry to cut you off here. Just a funny thought. What if you mentioned that the girls date the guys that are taller so that they have taller children. What if it's a girl? Yes. Do you guys tend to like taller women?
I don't give a shit.
No?
I don't care how tall she is.
We don't care, but that's not the issue. Is like between the two, if she were to have sex with a taller man to have a child, a woman doesn't hurt her. A tall man only helps her, so there's no risk to her if she were to do that. So that's why women find that more attractive. Now, the second thing is, where does that come from? And that is from the idea of protection. Taller men throughout history have had somewhat of an advantage. You see, like, it's something they discuss in boxing, like someone having a good reach. Yeah. But the reality of the situation is the men who can protect you today, because most men are 5'9", 5'10", whatever. If you were to look at MMA fighters, professional boxers, or guys who are Navy SEALs, most of them are under 6 feet tall. Recon Marines, most of them are under 6 feet tall. And those are the most dangerous, like by definition, the most dangerous humans on the planet. So the concept of he needs to be able to be over 6 feet tall to protect me isn't real. So that part is irrational. That part is irrational. But the part about like the genetic, like if you see a guy who's 6'3", he has the genetics of a person who's 6'3". That's impossible to fake. So that's the reason why women do, from an evolutionary standpoint, why they find those men to be so attractive.
And a lot of times, you know, what I notice is it's either you talk about this with girls and then have a dry season, or just kind of accept astrology and then and then text her at 11:11, you know, just to give her that this is the sign that it's meant to happen. You know what I mean?
It's really funny. I tell guys astrology is bullshit, and then I tell guys, if you want to use astrology to hook up with women, do it. I have no problem with you doing it.
Use the bullshit. Use the bullshit.
It's like social media is fake, and I'm okay with that. Astrology is bullshit, and I'm okay with that because the girls are real. You know, so I don't have a problem with that.
The result is definitely real.
Absolutely. Oh my God, you know what I noticed about you? You just have this awesome energy. My girlfriend hit me up last night, and I didn't feel like calling her out on this, but she was at a bar she used to work at. She's in Houston right now visiting her family, and she went to a place where she used to work. And there's a guy in there who's like a former NFL player, and he starts talking to her, and he's like, you know what's so crazy? You just have like this amazing energy about you, and this amazing way that you look at life. And she's like telling me the story, and it's like very obvious to those of you watching the show. Yeah. Obvious to me, this guy was just hitting on her.
Yeah. Of course.
And he's like, I want you to be part of this movie or whatever. And my girlfriend is incredibly talented, a terrific singer, and fantastically beautiful. But that's not why he was saying this. He's saying this because he's trying to smash.
Yeah.
Right. And in her mind, like, she didn't see that. And so,
he's just being nice.
Yeah, he's just being nice. Like, but they don't grasp that concept. But what he's doing is basically whatever he has to do. He's using whatever tactic he needs in order to, like, the fact that she's telling me the story in the first place means that what he did had some effectiveness to it. But that's what men do. Like, men who are really good with women, they understand. I'm just going to speak their language, and their language has no basis in reality and total basis in feelings. Now, I tend to not do that. What I do instead is I use pre-selection. I hit the pre-selection button. I run the pre-selection play probably too much, which is why I'm really good at it and which is why I'm able to teach it. I would just rather be myself, be surrounded by women, and have women be attracted to me, even though I play video games and fucking rescue cats and go to the gym 6 days a week and run a business where I talk about, crazy shit. I would rather a woman just be accepting of that because she's outrageously attracted to me because she sees other women attracted to me. I'd just rather live life like that than trying to, like, be an asshole or run astrology game on her or, like, bark at her or try to do negs or pick up shit. I'd rather just not do that. I'd rather just be attractive.
Well, that's a lot of work for no reason.
Barking, because I've seen some guys try that tactic nowadays.
Try to show their alphaness.
It's pretty amazing. It really is amazing. Like the problem isn't that it doesn't work, because it hardly ever works. The problem is when it does work. Like, do you understand how fucked up a woman has to be to, like, go fall for that shit? That's
hilarious. And then number two is actually the same situation I'm thinking of right now. Yeah, it actually works.
And like the problem is she's now encouraging that behavior, which is like ruining men. You know what I'm saying? Like, the worst thing in the world that could happen is for you to go to the roulette wheel and hit big, because then you're addicted to gambling, right? That's like the worst possible scenario. The worst possible scenario is that you do something stupid, like start barking at a woman, and it actually works one time, because then you film it and everybody else starts doing it, and you just incentivize the population to do something stupid.
Is that what happened? Is that what happened to that dude that turned himself into, like, officially into an Australian Shepherd? You seen that? This guy like got a bunch of surgery and, like, has, like, hair attached to his body and is legit walking around like an Aussie.
No, that's hilarious.
Crazy. I bet that's maybe happened. He barked at someone. They're like, "Yeah, we'll let you fuck." It's like, this is the key.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Like, sometimes these nonsense things will work, and then, but a lot of times I also see women will give each other, like, these dope shit advices, and somehow it makes sense in their head, like, and I'm like, why would you say that? Like, why would you say you like someone if you hate them? Yeah,
because it feels good. Like, so I know what you're referring to. Men, we generally don't do this as much. We generally, like, if there's 4 guys in a room and there's a 5th guy, and the 5th guy goes, "Yeah, my girlfriend cheated on us," the 4 guys who are not in that relationship all kind of say, "You need to break up with her because she cheated on you, and that's bad." We kind of understand. What we don't do is look at our buddy and be like, "She doesn't deserve you, bro. You're a fucking champ." Mm-hmm. You know what? You know why she cheated on you? Because your cock is too big, and she just can't take a big fat cock. We don't say stupid shit like that to our fucking guy friends. We're like, "Yo, bro, pick yourself up. We're going to go to the gym, and we're just going to become better." Women do this, unfortunately, when guys ghost them or when guys break up with them. They start telling them, "He didn't deserve you. You're just too much of an alpha bitch. He couldn't handle a bad bitch." No, he had a preference for some fucking peace in his life, and that's why he didn't deal with you, or you weren't physically attractive enough. And women don't tell each other that. And so because of that, they end up in this downward spiral. Next thing you know, they're 35 and they don't have a man, and they're unhappy because they believed their friend's terrible advice. He was intimidated by you. That dude was not intimidated by you.
I really liked hearing PBD said this the other day. He said, talking about him and his wife's dynamic, I'm like, when I go to my friends and I start talking to them, if I ever talk to them about my relationship, my friends, majority of the time, unless you did something outrageous, they're defending you. Tell me, don't fuck up. You're going to lose this good girl. Like, don't keep acting like an asshole. On the other hand, a lot of women's friends will go and do exactly what you're saying. "Oh, he doesn't deserve you. This and that," usually bashing the man.
It's so funny. Yeah, women are never, you go to a group of women and they're like, "You know what? You need to treat your man better." That's never their advice. Their advice is never, you know what you ought to do? Why don't you try being quiet and, like, listening to your man who's, like, actually giving you good advice? It's never women's advice to tell them that.
My best friend has told me so many times, "Be nicer. Don't lose that great girl." Like, that's literally the advice my best friend gives to me when it comes to my relationship, which I love, because that just shows me he thinks she's great for me. The whole dynamic is he thinks is healthy, and he's supporting that instead of trying to bash some situation they have no right bashing.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So
actually, I'm writing that down. That's really funny. Go ahead.
So this is the Matrix copy. I want to stick with that a little bit more. I think there's a book. It's Very Important People, I think, right? Where it talks about it talks about the promoters, and I think there was a professor teacher she was a 30-year-old teacher, a professor in university that went in undercover as a model, and then she got flown out to Mykonos and New York and all of these parties, and she writes about this life of how other women will like you if there are other pretty women around, right? Just to make sure it's copying.
It's one of the funniest things. If you read that book and don't pay attention to any of her fucking prescriptions about the book or her interpretation, it's a fantastic book. If you like, it's very clear. Like, she went out, had to party, drank, like studied this whole society. She definitely had a good time.
Yeah, she did.
She absolutely made friends with a bunch of people. And then at the end of every chapter, she has this caveat about how this is all based on patriarchy and racism. And I'm like, Ashley, that's not true. You had a fucking good time. Like, she's like, the whole thing is based on racism. And then she explains that 19 of the 40 club promoters she met were black, but it's based on racism. And then it was like, the whole thing is based on a patriarchy and women are just exploited. Meanwhile, she's flown to Paris, or she's flown to France to like be on a yacht. And it was like, and then gets to eat free food. And it's like, yes, you're exploited. It was just one of the craziest things. But the book's description, 10 out of 10. The book's interpretation, I would like to, hopefully I've emailed Dr. Mears a couple times. Hopefully I can get her on the show. I don't want to bash her, but like, it's very clear that like, this book looked like she took her doctoral thesis and turned it into a book, and in doing so, she had to include some wokeness so that her thesis would be accepted.
Doesn't get canceled.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah,
that's what.
And she was also bashing, some of those promoters, right? That did pay these bills for her. It's like, oh, one day he's gonna hit it big, and he just always talked about it but never got there. Which, I mean, if you take, Adam.
Yeah, but they never talked about the fact that the promoters were being taken advantage of the same way. Like, it was really funny. It was like, it was a patriarchy, but the patriarchy was taking advantage of men. So she didn't see the irony there. Like, that was the issue. And that the men, like, of their own volition were constantly around the club promoter. This is a very common thing you guys will see if you live in Miami, if you live in New York, if you live in Vegas, if you live in Los Angeles. Club promoters and VIP hosts will consistently be around wealth. And so in their mind, they see themselves as wealthy, but they're not wealthy. And they see themselves as like one or two deals away from becoming wealthy. Now, occasionally, like, they do become wealthy. An example would be Jason Strauss, who went from being club promoter to like owning clubs, or they pivot into high ticket sales or real estate and then become wealthy that way because they've used their skill set in the nightclubs as to become a salesperson. Those things do happen. But in the book, it was just one promoter after another who just barely made enough money to get by and always thought they were about to be a billionaire. Girl, I'm going to hit it big next year or whatever. And they were delusional. And I know so many club promoters who were very much the same way. And every week it was a new NFT grift, or it was a new fucking crypto grift, or it was a new Forex grift, or it was a new binary stock grift, or it was a new, or like I'm quitting my job and I'm going to go do solar. And I'm like, bro, you're like so late to the party on this.
Yeah.
It was stuff like that. And then when you ask them like, hey man, do you actually want to learn a skill set like Amazon FBA, or actually go sell cars? Like, go try being a car salesman. That was beneath them. And they didn't want to do that. Why? Because they were around so much wealth and opulence. So they assumed that they were deserving of that private jet or that trip to Mykonos where they got paid to bring a bunch of girls, not understanding that those people that you were on the jet with do not see you as their equal. Right. Actually, I would be another example of that. I would be an example of a guy who was doing stuff like that, who actually turned it into a real business. Most people in that situation don't do that.
Well, I think Adam from Saucecast, right? Adam used to be a promoter back in the day, but then he went and worked for sales, but he used those skills.
Because he used it for reverse insurance, which is he and PBD are both wealthy because of this reverse insurance industry that they're in. Basically, they buy time life insurance policies and then receive the payoff from them. Yeah.
So. With that being said, so you started the MOA. So what's next for Michael Sartain?
Grow the business to it. So, we're big fans of Alex Hormozi in our company, and Alex has this saying. It's called "New, Better, More," and so more, better, new. So we're going to do the thing with MOA. We're going to increase the ad spend to go more, and we want more salespeople. We want to improve our systems and processes so that would be better. And once we get to the point where we keep adding more and more and more, and then the system starts to break, like we don't have more growth, but we just keep adding more money to it, that's when we go to new. So new will be low ticket offer. New will probably be a business course that we're going to teach somewhere in the future. We're not teaching a business course now. but like basically a make money course. And so that's what we want to do in the future. I'm only interested in coaching. I really don't care about a lot of other stuff. And also the coaching allows me to have a podcast with no sponsors, which is another thing I enjoy because I can have guests on that I want on. I can have Ty Lopez on and Dan Bilzerian, which a lot of people want to see, but I got Alex Mayer coming on. I have Nicolette Shea, who's a porn star, coming on. I have people on that are interesting to me. I had a physicist on, flat earthers, people who are interesting to me I can have on my show because I'm not worried about sponsors and I'm not worried about offending people. So I like this little middle ground that I'm in. I'm not waiting for happiness or waiting for wealth. I'm happy now. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. So in the future, I want to get, I want to get MOA to do, 10 million a year, then 100 million a year. And then I want a second business and then eventually replace myself in those businesses and go do something else. Also, I think we're probably going to get, as far as our company is concerned, probably get into real estate, start buying properties and then renting them out to some of our clients so that we can start doing live-in programs with our clients, some house hacking stuff I want to get into. That's probably what I see us doing in the future.
So you had mentioned sales, and it reminded me of one of the many skills, I think the biggest skill that I took from working in retail a little bit, which is something that I wanted to talk about because it kind of showed me to be a bit of a chameleon, which we've talked about on the pod before, kind of why we think it's okay. And Jay's brought up a guy before that kind of is opposed to that, saying that you shouldn't adjust yourself regardless of the crowd you're in, kind of thing. But retail taught me to be able to be a chameleon in the sense of when you're presenting yourself to someone and being able to kind of match their vibe. Because for example, when I would sell things, some people would come in and they don't want a happy go nice person. They want they're ready for the dull person that's going to tell them what they need and to walk out of the door, or someone else that is looking for a conversation and a good experience, right? And I found that to be a very useful skill. And it seems to be that some people don't necessarily agree with that because you're kind of changing yourself depending on the person you're talking to.
Yeah. If you're in high ticket sales, you are going to have to change yourself. I see my guys will come in. I've got two of my sales guys live next door to me, and they'll come in and you just can see they're whipped because they're people will take them to dark places and start giving them objections and stuff like that. It's a combination of two things. The reason why the $100 million offer is such a genius book is because if the offer is good enough, the salesman shouldn't have to work so hard. The salesman should only have to work hard for the borderline sales, but the rest of them should be laydowns. And the way you do that is by building a brand. If you build a brand that's powerful enough, people are going to just have trust in you and be willing to buy your product. And then if you have a strong enough brand, a great example would be like Wes Watson. Wes Watson, I think, does $3 million a month with no sales team. He's able to sell via text. That requires a tremendous amount of they have to totally associate themselves with Wes as far as a brand so that they trust him, so that they're willing to give him money without having a sales team, without having a sales call. Right. That's really impressive. So the answer is all the things, the techniques you hear about being a good salesman, this comes through experience. Certain people are really good at it. Some people are not. But you as the person who builds the offer have to just do a better job of creating an offer that people want so that I want my salespeople to not have to work so hard, right? That's my job. And so I ask them for their feedback. I'm like, hey, what worked this week? What podcast did they like? What podcast did they not like? Tell me so that I can, know to go more on this type of podcast and less on this type. And so that's your job is the guy who has the product, manages the product, the CEO, whatever, is to make an offer that's good enough so your sales guys don't have to work so hard. But the rest of it, dude, there's no trick. There really isn't. I met people who, if I look at all my sales guys, their success, I'm completely convinced there is no one methodology to being good at sales. I just have too many sales guys that all take different routes and just kill it. And they're totally different from one another. Right. If you're introverted and you own your authenticity with your introversion, then it works. Some of these guys come from really sad, dark places, and they pass that along to the lead on the sales call, and they're just way more authentic and super fucking believable, and they close the sale doing it that way. Some of them are gregarious. Some of them know how to hit pain points. I'm just telling you, man, the great salespeople, they just come in all shapes and sizes. And so when guys are good, it's if you're Pat Riley and you're coaching Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson, what play do you run on offense? You run the get the fuck out of the way play. You give the ball to Magic and let him do whatever he wants. You know what I'm saying? That's what you do. When you have Michael Jordan on your team, the play is called give the ball to Michael and get the fuck out of the way. When you have good salesmen, the sales strategy that you need to invoke in your sales team is let them sell and get the fuck out of the way.
I like it.
That's what I tell you.
So now you're saying you grow the company. So as far as your relationship go, right? Personal life. You mentioned your girlfriend, and I think she's either Russian or she's Russian descent, right? The
Yeah,
parents
she's
are Russian.
she's half Russian.
Awesome. So how does that because how does that dynamic work? Does that dynamic work? Because you're kind of half Colombian, she's half Russian. There's a little bit of foreign, but it's kind of
Yeah.
the way I feel. You know, I'm Armenian. I grew up living in Lithuania, and then I came to United States, and I don't feel like I belong in Armenia, Lithuania, or United States. I'm somewhere in between,
Yeah.
in a limbo, stuck.
You're
How's that work for
international,
you
my
guys?
friend.
Because I've
Yeah,
dealt with
it's-
Russians before, and I've dealt
Yeah.
with Spanish people, so I
Yes.
kind of know how the.
So she identifies as a Razorback, and I identify as a Longhorn. Like that's probably the best way to explain it. Like
Okay.
I'm not confused about my identity. I live in Nevada, and I am from Texas. There's no.
I gotcha.
I will always be from Texas. My identity is centered around me being from Texas, and it's not ever like you. What is the core? The core part of my identity, I am a Texas Longhorn and Dallas Cowboys fan. Like that's it. So like for her, she's a fan of the Arkansas Razorbacks, and that's just how she sees herself. So it's not. I really don't align as much with my Colombian descendants, and she doesn't align with her Russian descendants.
Okay.
We're both from the South. And
Gotcha.
we grew up a couple hundred miles away from each other. Not at the same time, obviously. I'm 20 years older than her, but I grew up in North Texas, and she grew up in Arkansas, so not that far away. So a lot of that's very similar.
And how did you meet her? How did that dynamic work?
I have hosted 54 bikini competitions. I met her at bikini competition number 49 that I hosted. There were 70 girls at Swimsuit USA's World Championship in Mexico. When I say host, I'm the MC, and then I do recruiting for bikini
I
competition.
really like this story. Actually, I've heard it.
Yeah, and so and like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women that I had met, and I dated some of them, and she was just like, she just fit. She checked all the boxes immediately. She was the hottest woman I'd ever seen at any of these contests. I was totally blown away when I met her, and then when I talked to her and just like realized that she had these very like Southern qualities to her, and I just didn't realize how young and inexperienced she was with life. I just love the fact that I'm the first guy to take her to Miami. I'm the first guy to take her on a boat. I'm the first guy to take her this place, that place. I'm the first guy to give her these experiences. I just really appreciate that about her, and she's very loyal. And like, I don't ask her to clean my place. I just like, my place is just always clean. I don't ask her to take care of me. She's just always bringing me food. Like, she just understands that, just because that's how she was raised. So and she's just outrageously attractive too. So like, that was it. I met her at the contest. I remember seeing her and being like, that's the hottest woman I've ever seen in my life. And I go up and talk to her, and it's very clear that the other judges were not liking her. So she had a really big boob job, because for her age, most girls, that she's got the second boob job size, but she's her first boob job, because she had a fucking growth in her chest that she had to get removed. So she had a mastectomy. So she got a boob job because of that, but she got it at 19 years old.
Wow.
And so when you see her, if you see a girl who looks like her, she looks like she's young, but because she has a boob job, you don't think she's 20 years old or 21 years old. And then she also has a fucking attitude like a rattlesnake. She's good to me, but she's mean as fuck to people she doesn't like. And because of that, she was not flirting with any of the judges, with all the other pageant girls were. So she wasn't flirting with the judges. She had this really big boob job, and I was like, I knew she wasn't going to win the contest. But I was like, we ended up hooking up at the event. We spent a week together at the resort, and then after the next day, she told me, she was like, I thought that was it. We were just one night stand, and that was going to be the end of it. And I bought her tickets to come to Vegas like the next day, and I was like, we're going. Like, you need to understand, I'm taking this seriously, and I want to make this work. And it took. That was in October. She moved in with me in March next year, and then we've been together ever since then.
So that's awesome. I love this that you said that she has the traditional. She's from the South. Now there's this big movement of passport bros, and what I've noticed again, living in different countries and traveling to different countries, all over South America and all the hottest spots you can possibly think of. What I've noticed that yes, some of the women are a little more feminine in these other countries, but the base of what women in nature want, the safety, security, and the blah blah blah, never changes across the board. Whether you're in the United States, whether you're in Colombia, whether you're in Lithuania, whether you're in Armenia, that does not change, right? But then you have this big movement of passport bros that will go there in hopes that they're going to bring someone here.
Yeah. So the problem is what they're doing is they're going there and they're like, the women in Colombia or in Romania are more feminine. Because that's just how they were raised, and that's not the case. They're more feminine because they're poor.
Yes.
There's no middle class in these countries, and they see you as a ticket out. So they will become feminine and submissive in order for you to marry them. Then they come to the United States, they bump into their friends who explain to them what a divorce attorney is, and then they take half your shit.
I want half, Eddie.
Passport. Yeah.
That Eddie
I
Murphy
want
joke.
half Eddie.
Yeah, I love
Eddie,
that joke. Yeah. The bush bitch.
Yeah. So I mean that's what happens. Like the passport bros are going. The passport bro phenomenon is not old enough for guys to realize this. Once the passport bro phenomenon is like about a decade old, you're going to start seeing passport bro divorcees, where these girls came from other countries.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? Our final for the bikini competition at Wet Republic, 9 of the 30 girls were from Poland. 9 of the 30, and we had 1 from Ukraine too. And the girl who won the year before was from Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So like with it, we're talking a couple 100-mile radius. All these girls had the descendancy. One of them was half Polish, half Mexican, but like they were all Polish. It was one of the craziest things I'd ever had. See, top 3 in all 3 of my preliminaries. One of the top 3 was Polish, in all 3 of them. And it's just weird. It's like there's just the genetics of these women who live in this certain part of the world that are just very attractive, right? Same thing in certain parts of like Colombia.
I don't know if it's genetics. I think they're just like, living in that part. Like people take care of themselves. Like they actually watch what they eat. They take.
Maybe that's what it is. But these women had phenomenal bone structure. Like that's what I saw. But yeah, I can see that definitely. So anyway, like it was just one of these situations where I think the passport bro thing, they're going to enjoy it for a while and then come to the realization that no, you met a girl who was basically about to become a prostitute in Medellin, but she was so grateful that she was so grateful that you pulled her out of that she will be as feminine as you fucking want. And then when she comes here for a while and she has a couple of your kids, and then she just sees, what the options that are open to her being an American citizen, then all of a sudden you're gonna, you're
not looking so good.
Yeah, you're going to get a piece of paper and get served for divorce divorce proceeding. That's what's going to happen because you instead of fixing yourself, you went to another country to find a woman so you could still be hateful, misogynistic, and fucking overweight. And you went there to try to find a better woman. And by the way, you did find a better woman, but it's only because you did what's called sexual arbitrage. You took advantage of the fact that you live in one of the countries with the higher standard of living in the world. You went to a country with a low standard of living and disproportionately attractive women, and you just took one of those women out of the population, brought her back with you to the United States, but you forget she's now an American citizen, especially when she has kids with you. It's over, bro. Prenup or no, once you have kids, that is the fucking winner. And that's what essentially happens. So these guys are going to figure out that these women that they think are more traditional in other countries, the passport bros, they're actually the same women. And if you understand evolutionary psychology, you'll understand that concept.
No, and I have no issues with taking care of your woman, right? Like even if they live there. But then needs to be an understanding that, there's the amount of money that the United States makes, and even if you live in that area, at this point, she's just with you because you're able to give her that life. And there's nothing wrong with giving a beautiful life to your wife. But at the same time, I want to know that girl is willing to do everything else to keep this relationship together. The minute the money dries out, she's out, right? So I don't know how that's going to work for them. And I don't agree with that. I mean, it is what it is. Some people love it. But I don't know that... I'm glad we had this conversation because I'll tell people about this and they don't believe it.
For sure, yeah. I mean, the passport bros thing, it's just not a huge issue to me. But like, they're guys that I know that I'm close with. But they're honest with me. Like, yeah, I just moved to Medellin because I like to fuck and it's easy. Like, they don't try to convince me that they'd like moved to Medellin and all of a sudden they have like super game and that they happen to be dating girls who are like 8, 9s, and 10s because their game is awesome. They're doing it because what you do. Here's how passport. Okay, but here's how passport bro works. You find a country with an extremely low standard of living, and you find a country with disproportionately attractive women. Okay, so Poland and Colombia would be 2 like first runner-ups for this type of deal.
There's something in the water in Colombia. I swear to God, those women are
for sure.
Beautiful.
So like, those would be 2 places. Brazil, there's some attractive women, but there's also women that are not attractive. But there's disproportionately more attractive women in Colombia than there are in like say Mexico or the southern United States. Okay. So you go to those places. This doesn't work in Canada because they don't have a low standard of living. This doesn't work in the UK because they don't have a low standard of living and the women are not disproportionately attractive. This sort of works in Australia, but it's just too far and they don't have a super low standard of living, right? So where would this work? Like it doesn't work in Sweden and Norway and Finland because they don't have a low standard of living, but they do have disproportionately attractive women. So where do you find the disproportionately attractive women with the low standard of living? You find it in Lithuania, Latvia, you find it in Poland, you find it in Ukraine. And you find it in Panama, you find it in Colombia, Venezuela, and you find it in places like that. maybe so that's the issue. And when you see those places, that's where the passport bros go almost exclusively. You do not see passport bros going to fucking going to what's it called, Tibet. You don't see passport bros, going to Namibia. You don't see that. You just don't see that happening. You see passport bros going to specifically places where those two things are happening.
Right.
Disproportionately attractive women and a low standard of living, or in addition to a low standard of living, no middle class.
Yeah, and that's what it is. You come in with your blue passport. Now your status is high. Those little levers. Your status is high, but then you bring them over here, and they're like, "Well, I could afford this sandwich over there. Now we're affording the same sandwich here. So what has changed about my situation? Nothing. Now I have to be a dutiful wife, give you children, and take care of the house. And on top of that, work. Are you out of your fucking mind? I'll do that for a couple of years.
The part he forgets is she also gets that blue passport.
Yes.
As soon as those babies come out of her, she also gets the blue passport. So whatever you thought was going on, was her desire for you genuine, or were you a way out? Because if you're a way out, she will eventually resent you, and then the passport bro experiment ends up blowing up in your fucking face.
Yep. I have friends on both sides of the fence, right? The guys and the girls that have done the same exact thing when they're like, well, it just didn't work. It wasn't there, but they ended up getting a divorce. Good thing none of them have children.
So I have a change the dynamic a little bit. Go back to the military. We had a good friend of ours, Ozzy, on the other day, and he basically said, "Man, the men today are pussies. America should implement 1 year mandatory service for every man." What do you think about that? Because I don't know if I necessarily agree with something like that.
So the problem with that is because of the size of our population, the expenditure would be too high. It costs money to train individuals to be in the U.S. military. You'd have too many people objecting. One of the things is we don't have a large military as far as manpower. We have an extremely technologically advanced military as far as hardware, and so this works in Israel because you need a disproportionately large military in proportion to the size of the population in order for that country to defend itself.
Right.
The United States doesn't need that. The United States, at most, needs 2 million people to defend the entire country at most, because nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and B-2 Spirit heavy bombers, they don't need a lot of people in order to rain down massive amounts of destruction on people.
Right. And so I had another friend of mine. He asked me this question: with something like this, what would it be like for women in the military, right? So, and he also started asking me about what would you think about women going into more of these traditionally male roles in the military, like, I don't know, a SEAL or something like this, right?
Yeah. So women, this is a great discussion to have. It's an interesting discussion because it then illuminates reality. Women are not going to be SEALs and recon Marines. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
You would have to have a woman who had such a genetic abnormality in order for her to become a Navy SEAL.
Right.
It's just not realistic. And if it happens once, it'll only happen once. It'll be one out of every 7,000 women that apply. It's going to happen one. You're just going to have some woman who's just a freak hermaphrodite and just able to do it. But it's the exception does not prove the rule. Women do not have. What happens is, because of when women go through puberty, when their pelvis gets wider, the line, there's an orthopod who was explaining this to me, but it goes hip, knee, ankle is not aligned directly straight. It actually bows out at the knee. And so because of that certain athletic activity, I was talking to an orthopedic surgeon, a knee surgeon, he was like, disproportionately high number of women come who are athletes and have ACL reconstruction than compared to the same number of men, because their bodies were not created to take that level of strength. For female athletes. Female athletes have ACL reconstruction and hip problems and problems with their ankles at a higher rate than men do, because men have thicker joints and bigger muscles and bigger bones. So, it's just one of these situations where it's like, you're just not going to see them take those roles. Fighter pilot, yes, and I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
You have to, as long as you meet the same requirement, bro. That is a $100 million jet. It better be the exact same requirements for the woman it is for the man. As long as it's the same requirements, I don't have an issue with it. Tank commander, I don't have an issue with that. I don't have surface commander, I don't have an issue with that. Submariner, I don't really have an issue with that. But frontline infantry, that is just not going to happen.
They're not necessarily physically demanding. They're more mentally exhausting, if anything.
Yes,
so.
For sure. Listen, the reason why I don't have a problem with the submariner is because women in general are smaller, and that is a good place to be small.
Right.
Being 6'4" in a submarine is not a good thing to do. Being a narrower, competent human being, on a submarine is probably better. Also, same thing with fighter pilots. You don't want 6'9" fighter pilots. You want smaller individuals. So I don't have an issue with that so much. As long as they are put through the same strenuous tests as other people are, that men and women are, then I'm totally fine with that.
Absolutely.
I'm totally fine with that.
You know what I also find? There's this disproportionate amount of people that somehow believe that a woman and men can be on a strength level equal. For example, there are a lot of girls will jump into a fight with a guy, and then when the guy says, "Hey, listen, all of us are here have done martial arts, for some rudimentary striking, a lot of jiu-jitsu going on." But the whole idea here is like that they say, well, a fighter, a striker woman can overtake a guy, which I don't believe in that. And guys make fun of me all the time.
No. Listen to this, Michael. Listen to this. Jay here thinks he could beat up Amanda Nunes.
I could.
I think
I
Amanda
really think
Nunes
I
would
could.
probably kill him.
Okay. So I've discussed this before. If you have a man, if you train for 6 months, and we're talking like a weight class, so like for Amanda Nunes, if I got to fight Amanda Nunes and I outweighed her by 50 pounds, and I got to train, realistically, if I could get her down in the first, 30, 40 seconds or a minute and a half, a lot of men would be able to win. The problem is if it went anything further than that, her wind is going to be so superior to yours, she's going to beat the shit out of you. That's what I think it is. It is a function of when I say a man. So the problem is I've rolled with jiu-jitsu instructors that were female that were much more skilled than me,
right?
And I'm just so strong that I can, like, they'll have an arm lock like this, and I'll just go, and I'll just pull out of it. There's a point to where I'm so heavy and strong. There's certainly I wrestled a guy who was 300, like 298 one time, and the only thing I could do was get him to try to stand over me, and got him in a leg lock because I couldn't armbar this guy, and his neck was so fucking thick. There's certain genetic abnormalities or like differences that cause
Jay here
not
can't
be
be
able
choked.
Yeah, they make fun of me because nobody can choke me. So.
Yeah, no, but realistically, like, I would say if you make it a point to train, and let's say you have 40% of Amanda Nunes' training, but you're 40 pounds heavier than her, and a man, you will beat her. Yes, I do think so. If it's a situation where it's a normal guy on the street, I have no doubt she can hit really fucking hard. Like, it's just a street fight.
She'll walk over.
Me and my boys just get into a brawl. Amanda Nunes is going to be able to hold her own and probably knock somebody out.
Right.
Maybe knock someone out. One of the issues is, though, like, you notice you don't see as many knockouts once you get to that 154 weight range. But when you get to 190, 210, the problem is bad heavyweights who aren't skilled can still knock each other out at 210.
Right.
When you're like the 140, 130, 140, 150,
exactly,
it's a lot harder to generate that power to knock a guy out.
There's way more.
I literally watched
way more
Chalo and I watched Canelo and Chalo last night, and I mean, Canelo hit Chalo really fucking hard in the head and did knock him out. Like, I mean, it's really hard. Like, you just don't see as many knockouts at that weight class. You see better boxing, but you don't see as many knockouts.
Exactly. The technique is more there, but so just because you're bigger, you can generate so much more power without having to involve the technique.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. The other issue is this, right? So if I was going to fight, a female MMA fighter, it's just, again, I'm trying to be as like make this as dispassionate, as non-emotional as possible, and have as little to do with race or gender as possible. I just have a thicker skull and a bigger neck, and so my ability, like, don't get me wrong, some guys are just pussies. If you hit them hard in the face, they're just gonna be like, "Ow!" I've been hit in the face several times, so like, I just know what it's going to be like. She's gonna hit me in the face, and if I don't get knocked out, all of a sudden I'm gonna become real fucking brave. I'm like, okay, that's what happened. If you ever watch, what great example of this was Tyson and Holyfield. When Holyfield won the first time, there was a point where Holyfield and Tyson are going back and forth, and Mike catches with one of those nukes. He catches Holyfield with a full-on right hand nuke to the head, and Holyfield just fucking eats it and looks right back at Mike Tyson. And you saw this was, and I knew immediately at that point this is going to go really bad for Mike, because once you get hit like that and you realize you're not going to die, you get real fucking brave. And that's what I think would happen.
It reminds me of Yoel Romero. He's got so many famous clips of just getting head kicked. Like, looks like he's in another dimension for a split second, and then he just right back there. Boop.
Yeah, well, once you, again, same thing happens in football. During the kickoff, once you hit that guy, once you get that first hit in, or quarterback, once you get hit that first time and you realize you're not going to die, then all of a sudden things open up and let's fucking rumble. You understand what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, Michael, I don't know how much time you have. We don't want to take up too much of your time. I don't know if you have things going on.
If you have questions written down, it's fine.
Okay, cool. So another thing with out of the conspiracy theory, is there a conspiracy theory, or is there someone that you've spoken to that made you're like, okay, you know what? Like you're actually, whatever you're talking about makes no sense. This doesn't exist, but you're pretty intelligent.
You show
Like,
some kind of competence.
You show some sort of a competence.
No.
Debating.
Most people in that you have to understand. So you have to think about horsepower and like, so you have a car that has 500 horsepower. That doesn't mean you have a good driver in the car. Right? You could take a 500 horsepower car and drive it right off a cliff, or you can take a 1100 horsepower car and win the Indy 500. Okay, just because you have the horsepower doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do something with it. A lot of people I know who like believe in conspiracy theories are otherwise rational individuals with high IQs. It's just for whatever happened. What happened is emotionality got involved, and it feels so good to believe Sandy Hook was fake. It feels good, like it just feels good to say that. And then they go and say irrational things. The problem is what generally happens, this is what I've seen, is that it's a victim mentality that leads to a lot of people wanting to believe these conspiracies, because then I don't have to blame myself for my lot in life. And so because of that, then I have the Illuminatis and the lizard people to blame instead. And that's where you get into the situation. It's not necessarily that they're dumb. It's that it just feels good to be a victim. It feels good to have a victim mentality. And the victim mentality then extends to, well, this didn't happen during World War II, and so there shouldn't be an Israeli state, or this didn't happen because these people did this, and that's why 9/11 happened, and that's the reason why I'm poor. Like it eventually extrapolates to this conspiracy happened, but if you keep going down the path, this is the reason why I'm poor and broke and fat.
And
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. I see that in some of the younger friends of mine. They'll say exactly that. Well, there's this cabal of people that are together, they're doing things, and they're controlling the world. And to me, that makes no sense, because here's the thing. If I'm a billionaire, I can't talk to millionaires. I need to be communicating with billionaires, because there's only so many billionaires in the world. So obviously we all know each other, like, because we're doing businesses together. So it doesn't mean that there's a conspiracy of some sort going on. We're just on a different level of business. And I think a lot of guys will spend so much time diving so deep into this, forgetting everything else is out there. Let's just have you to become a millionaire first, then worry about what billionaires are doing, if there's a cabal out there or anything like that. So I don't know. That's just one thing that always bothered me. And a lot of times I get pushback from guys like, well, bootstraps don't exist. Pulling yourself by bootstraps doesn't exist. And I have a hard time getting through some of these guys by saying, hey, listen, it does. Look at me. I came in. Yeah. I mean, my father didn't.
Yeah, but it's a victim mentality, because if you bootstrapped and became famous, and like the Illuminati wasn't behind your back, then it makes their life not make sense. People are their lives make more sense if I'm unhappy, but I'm not unhappy. Like what they need to, very often I get these messages, Michael, what you're doing is you have a hole inside, and you're just trying to fill that hole with all these women and this void. Bullshit. And I'm like, but it's just not true. But their life feels better if it is true. And so that's the reason why they have to say those things. I don't have to explain away their life decisions, but they have to explain away mine. What does that tell you?
Just a lot of projecting. Right?
Well,
they are. It was similar happens when I debate cold approach pickup artists. Like, they're always having to explain away my success and my client's success, but I don't have to explain away theirs.
Right.
Well, there's also a lot of times, these people usually are like, well, I'm going to win the lottery. I'm going to sue somebody to get money. They don't realize that it's like preparation meets opportunity. This is where these accidents happen. When you create penicillin, when accidents happen, you create that water gun that shoots really well. It's just
preparation creates luck. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times you'll say that was like, well, no, you have a leg up because your parents were smart. That's why you're smart. Well, you know what? Like 5% of the society is psychopaths. It doesn't mean that everyone else is a psychopath, or it doesn't mean that I'm intelligent. It just means that I worked a little bit harder, maybe on one thing or another thing. That's why I'm where I am. And I don't like when people blame other people for their success or not success, right? Or take.
I think it was Tom Bilyeu who said something like this. And he may have taken it from someone else. He says, "I will believe whatever is useful for me." So some people out there, if you're like have serious problems with anxiety and you need to believe in astrology and the 5 love languages in order to like function as a human being, and it actually maybe like the belief in energy and vibes makes you a better salesperson, whatever you need to believe in order to function in society, that's maybe what you have to do. I know some people who cannot deal with any anxiety and they smoke marijuana every day. And to be fair, like, I don't know what the other option is for them, but that's what they need to do. I'm not one of those people. And I understand people need to cope, but just recognize what you're doing is coping, and then don't come at me and tell me that I'm stupid because I don't believe in astrology.
So you
can't. Go ahead.
You don't drink, right? You don't drink, and so
No.
when did you make that decision to stop drinking? I've made that decision about
I never
2
started
years
drinking.
ago. You never started drinking.
I've never had 2 full drinks any night in my entire life.
Okay.
I never
So,
started drinking.
so when not necessarily that I stopped drinking. So my entire family, the way it worked, my grandfather would drink everybody under the table. He made his own wine in the backyard with
Sure.
big urns. My
Same
uncle
thing.
is the
I
same
had an
way.
uncle who would drink everybody on the table. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And my brother and I, we can drink. I mean, when I say we can drink a lot and not get belligerent, right? Like we handle our alcohol pretty well. But then I made 2 years ago, I made the decision of not drinking. And a lot of my friends like, well, what do you mean you're not drinking? I was like, well, I'm not drinking. I function better. I made less stupid choices when I'm not, or at least it feels to me I'm making stupid choices when I'm drunk. So you're saying you never started drinking and never done drugs or any of that stuff?
Yeah, I just don't really fall to peer pressure. I just never saw the necessity to do it. I just for me, my goals in life are very clear. It have to do with my fitness, my relationships with other people, my dating life, and my money. And I just never saw the positive of drinking, so I just never started doing it. So I don't have a hatred for it. I just never started doing it.
And you also you've mentioned, talking about fitness. You've mentioned you also are you on TRT right now, or you're thinking about going on TRT?
No, I've been on TRT since 2000.
And I think Belzerian has mentioned
2019, yeah.
Belzerian has mentioned this, right? When he tried to go into SEALs, at first he couldn't get in until he realized that everyone else was doing TRT.
Yeah, he was taking hardcore steroids. Yeah, he was taking anabolic steroids. He did not care. He wasn't even taking Clomid or fucking anastasol. He was just shooting up fucking hardcore steroids.
Right.
No, and do you think TRT has helped you or given you that little kick in the ass?
Yeah,
to go through a day to day,
to the point where it's frightening, to the point where I think this will be illegal pretty soon.
Really?
It's night and day. Yeah, everyone I know who takes it, especially over the age of 38, it's 100% satisfaction guaranteed. No one I know gets off of it. The only time where I see people complaining is when they do things like they don't follow directions. So like they don't give blood, or they don't take an estrogen blocker, or like they don't follow the directions because they watch some conspiracy video on YouTube. If you do what the doctor recommends, for the most part, you're going to be pretty good. There's different levels to stuff. Like, for instance, HGH is better than tesamorelin, which is better than Semarilyn. Testosterone cypionate, or what it's called. Oh God, what's the other one I was thinking of? HCG is better than fucking Clomid, which is better than fucking Kisspeptin, Ganatorilin. Like, you can find there's different levels to it, but TRT, really what it is, it's biohacking using peptides. That's essentially what it is, using peptides and hormones.
Cool.
1 second.
So TRT has helped you get where you need to go.
Yeah, there would be no MOA if I wasn't on TRT. Yeah, sure.
Oh, gotcha. And how did you go about finding a doctor? I mean, how did you go about finding
Easiest
the doctor
thing in the
that's
world. It doubles. There's probably 15 million men on TRT right now in the United States. It's you would go to just look up a TRT clinic or male enhancement clinic or something like that.
or
Don't go, like, here's the thing, guys. Go to a performance, like a TRT clinic. Don't go to a urologist. Urologists can prescribe TRT, but they won't.
I see what you're saying.
Don't go to urologists. Don't go to an endocrinologist, because they're going to tell you that, like, your total test in the 200s is in, quote unquote, the normal range, which is like not the normal range. That's scary fucking low.
Right.
So I've exhausted all the questions I had for you, and
Okay.
is there anything I should have asked you?
No, man, it was great. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, I think it's probably the 400th interview I've done since I started MOA. So
Wow.
if it's not on here, it's one of the other ones.
And that's what we wanted to do. I know, because MOA is your bread and butter. Not only bread and butter, that's your baby, right? Like, so I wanted to make sure we talk about this, and I wanted for you to tell the exact reason why you created MOA, right? Like, it's not just meet bunch of women and do this and have threesomes. There's more to it than just that.
I mean,
right?
that's fun too,
but
it's there's a lot to it. I sell you what you want, and then I teach you what you need. I kind of lure them in with the glitz, the glamour, and the parties and the girls, and then once you get in there, you find out it's basically a leadership course. And a lot of people have a hard time understanding or grasping that concept. But yeah, MOA is a leadership course. That's essentially what it is. Leadership and networking course.
Alrighty, yeah, I think that's it. I think we covered everything we wanted to cover with you, brother. I really must say again, I really appreciate you giving us this opportunity to have this conversation with you.